If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People who met humans that weren't human. True stories of alien, non-human, and disguised paranormal entity encounters that felt real but were terrifying.
Unnatural figure on road. The other night I was driving through Culiacan around 9 and saw a disturbing figure crawling along the road. It looked like a woman with long, straight hair, but it didn't look human. It had no legs and had large hands that looked like they had claws and had a very thin neck. I couldn't see much of her face because it was dark, but she seemed pale. I don't know if this was real or if it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but it was still very creepy. In October 2024 I was hiking in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah. A man was coming down the trail a couple switchbacks above me. The first thing I noticed was his clothing. It seemed very strange and out of place for someone out on a hike. Almost futuristic with an old world Euro feel. As I came closer to him, we both stopped, and I immediately noticed his eyes were unlike anything I've ever witnessed. They were a shade of blue I've never seen before and have difficulty describing. The color was so bright, rich, and vibrant. They seemed large for his thin face, and his skin was different somehow, a strange dullness to it. I felt mesmerized by his eyes and had a hard time looking away. We spoke briefly about where he had been on the mountain. He asked very specifically about where I had been and where I was heading. He was very matter of fact and showed no emotion until I mentioned I was heading up to stash water for an upcoming deer hunt. He seemed awash in disgust after hearing that. We said goodbye and continued on in our separate directions. I'm an ultramarathon, long-distance mountain runner and have happened upon thousands of people on the trail, none of whom I can vividly remember with the exception of this single person. I will never forget the color of those eyes. I've never seen that color before or after. It seemed otherworldly. For just a simple exchange from a passerby, in an inexplicable way, it is the strangest experience I've had on the mountain. My first non-human encounter, and hopefully the last too. One of my encounters was really creepy. I was staying at our flat where I lived with my roomies, but I was the only one in the apartment at that time. There was a long L-shaped corridor leading to the kitchen. At around 11 p.m. I started hearing sounds as if there was someone in the apartment, so I just popped a message in our group chat asking who it was, but everyone confirmed they were not there. So I automatically thought someone got in and went to investigate. All lights were off, and I wasn't hearing any noises anymore, so I left my room and slowly walked to the kitchen with the lights still off, because the light switch was at the other end of the kitchen and the bulb in the corridor was broken. The only source of light was the moonlight coming through the window. I entered the kitchen, and there was no one, so I just stared at the empty place for a few seconds when, suddenly, a glass knocked itself off of the kitchen counter and shattered. Immediately after that I heard quick steps, or more like stomping, coming in my direction, so I turned around and ran out of the apartment as fast as I could. The stomping was following me as I ran, and I could feel a clear presence right behind me, but it stopped right as I left the apartment through the front door. I was in my pajamas, barefoot, with neither keys nor phone on me, so I went back in, quickly grabbed my phone, keys, and shoes, and went out and walked around the neighborhood for about 2 hours, talking to a friend of mine on the phone about what just happened. Nothing else happened since, but I had only lived there for about 6 more months before moving out. This wasn't my first encounter, but it definitely was the first that made me feel uneasy, as I am quite familiar with paranormal activities and ghost hunting. This was not a ghost, and it was not happy to have a tenant. Anyone else with similar experiences? Once I was walking home alone late at night, and I was crossing under this underpass. I saw this guy standing there, relatively normal looking, kind of dressed like a hipster. I can't remember if he crossed the street to be on my side or if I didn't cross away from him, but either way, our paths crossed. He did the dance Y thing that people do, you know, when you're trying to go around each other but you both move in the same direction. Then we made eye contact. 2 things immediately became clear. First was that he was deliberately blocking my path, and second was that something was very wrong with this man. I've never seen anything like it before or since. I didn't see any life in his eyes. No humanity, no soul. It's really difficult to describe what I saw, or didn't, see in his eyes. I wasn't that far from home, so I just started sprinting. He chased me. I have no idea how long he was after me. I didn't take time to look back, but I heard him running after me. I got home unharmed and let myself in. I didn't see him anymore. Dark figure with horns. About 4 years ago, my friend and I were having a sleepover at his house. It was late, and we were sitting in the living room when we both noticed something moving outside the window. A tall, dark figure walked past. At first it just looked like a man, around 6 feet tall, but then we noticed what looked like horns coming from the sides of his head. They were thick and curved, longer than they should have been. The figure was completely dark, with no details, and it moved slowly past the window. We got scared immediately. We closed the curtains, locked all the doors, and stayed in the living room for the rest of the night. 2 years later, we were back in the same house, sitting in the same room. We saw it again. It looked exactly the same as before. Same height, same shape, same horns. The only difference was how it moved. It walked noticeably slower this time. We didn't really talk about it after that. Eventually, we stopped bringing it up and forgot about it. Now we sometimes joke about it, especially when we're out camping late at night. But even now, it still doesn't feel like a joke. And I can't help thinking that if we ever see it again, it'll be moving even slower than before. If you've experienced something similar, leave a comment, please. Definitely not me. Alrighty, so first of all, my husband can say some pretty weird stuff in his sleep or when he's half asleep. At first, that's what I chalked this up to be too. Until he talked to me about the same details the next day when he was wide awake. Okay, so to start, my husband falls asleep pretty easily. He's in the military, and I have insomnia, so I usually stay up later than him. Well, I thought he had fallen asleep, so I got up to use the bathroom, only to end up being in there for a while because I get distracted by my phone. Finally, I get out of the bathroom and walk to my bed, only for my husband to ask, "Have you been in the bathroom?" I was confused since our bathroom has that annoying type of light that makes a fan turn on, and it's loud even if you are asleep. I tell him I was, and he just says the creepiest damn thing. He says, "Oh, I could have sworn you were in the corner staring at me." I scan my dark room, and nothing is even remotely human-shaped, so I ask what he meant, and then he says something that sends chills down my spine. He says in a voice that sounds tired but wide awake, "I thought you were mad at me and crouching behind the trash can with your phone on and lightly glowing, and I could see you staring at me." I literally jumped into bed and cuddled into him. It scared me, but I figured he was just in his little, still mostly asleep state. Nope. This man then tells me the next day while he is wide awake that he thought I had gotten mad at him in the middle of the night, walked over to this little wire trash can we have in our room, sat behind it with my phone screen on to illuminate my face slightly, and was just staring him down super intently, only for me that was crouching there to disappear when I got out of the restroom. Creeped me the hell out and made me not want to look around my room at night or get up at night anymore. I used to take my cat for evening walks, as she enjoys the outdoors. However, I prefer not to let her roam freely among the local wildlife. At the time, I lived in an apartment complex and would meet neighbors walking around with their dogs or just on their own enjoying the night. My cat never really wanted to go near anyone but was generally chill. Twice, I went out at about 11 p.m. and came across an older woman, in her 80s, who seemed pleasant, but of course it was a bit odd to meet an old woman who walked alone at almost midnight. And both times, my cat absolutely lost her tiny cat mind. Growling and hissing, trying to escape her harness and hide under bushes, it was wild. I was thinking, "Ma'am, are you a demon or something? Because if you are, you have to tell me, it's the law." Anyway, I moved out of there shortly after and escaped unscathed by the little old lady demon. It stands on my door. I was in my room one night at age 11, overthinking about life and trying to sleep. Maybe it was 11 p.m. My room in my parents' house, in that period of time, was the one that pointed to the street, so there was a considerable amount of light in the room. I was lying in my bed when, for some reason, I decided to look at the door, which was a bit far from the bed and open, and I could clearly see a small human shape in the dark. It was pale and very recognizable, slightly transparent but still visible, resembling the shape of a little girl. Imagine the shape of a 5-year-old. I was not afraid because my sister liked to walk around the house sometimes at night. I know, pretty weird. My mom always said she was brave, and she was actually like 4 or 5 years old. I thought something like, "Why doesn't she come in and sleep with me?" The next second, the door slammed the hell out by itself. No wind, no one pushing it. By itself and really hard. The figure doesn't move. I just scream, "Dad!" with all my voice, scared as hell. And he came quickly, asking what happened. I told him all of this, and he said, "It was the wind." I screamed, "The hell of wind are you talking about? The window is even closed." For someone that speaks Spanish, I exactly said to him, "¿De qué chucha estás hablando? La ventana está cerrada. XD." He tried to calm me down, and I asked to stay with Mom. He proposed to stay in my room for that night. Since then, I can't sleep with open doors, regardless of what type they are, closets, for example, and my bed can't be positioned where I can see the door in front of me. Doors represent an object strongly related to many of my paranormal experiences. This is just one of them. I believe that a demon, or something disguised as my cousin, attempted to kill me. So let me set the scene. It's June 2021, and my family and I were at the rented lake house. It's an annual tradition for my family. So I was chilling in the water, and I had this big rock I was carrying, and this rock was heavy as hell. I was chilling, and my cousin, I'm going to call him Jay, pulled up out of nowhere. He was like, "Yo, we should go swim to the nearby cove," and I went along. Since I was carrying my big rock, I was trying to stay where I could touch, but after a few steps, the water just dropped. I tried to swim up to the surface, but I wanted to keep my rock, so I was basically drowning a little bit, and I thought, duck it, and abandon my rock. I swam back to where everyone was at, and I looked behind me, and Jay was gone. I was like, that's weird. I swam back to where everyone was, and I saw Jay coming down the little grass hill that led to the water from the actual house, perfectly dry. I felt a wave of terror and dread come over me. If Jay were dry, how could he have been in the water just 5 minutes ago? Not to mention he was coming down from the lake house. Believe this or don't, it really happened. Yes. Rural upstate New York, summer of 2021. My partner and I were on our way to a state forest for a night of hiking and camping. Driving the winding back roads, we finally come to a pull-off that we assume was parking for the forest, as Google Maps said we were there, and there was also a very outdated car, like an 80s sedan, parked there. Nothing in sight but nature. We got out of the truck, and before we could even take a few steps to start grabbing our gear out of the back, a man appeared in front of the old sedan. He stared at us with the brightest blue eyes I'd ever seen for a minute, then asked, "Are you neighbors?" Confused by the question, it took a second for us to formulate an answer. We responded that we were parking to go hike and camp for the night. That's when he responded, "Well, there's a residence back there." He pointed further into the woods, where no house was visible, but a few older vehicles from the 80s and 90s were in the grass, each in different states of disrepair. There was no trail the way he pointed, and we were still shocked at how he seemingly appeared in front of this vehicle. We didn't hear anyone walking, no sticks breaking, etc., and when he brought our attention to the residence, the confusion got deeper, as he definitely would have made noise walking through the woods if he had come from where he was pointing. He never moved from the front of the car and didn't express any emotion the whole time he spoke, and I'm not even certain he had a lower half to his body at this point. We replied, "Oh, sorry, we thought this was camping parking or something similar," but he simply continued to stare at us. He never said hello or goodbye or engaged in any other typical conversation. Before we left, he said, "Stay safe out there." Getting in the truck and backing out, he stayed in the same spot he stood in the whole time. We both watched him stand there, staring, no wave or anything. He turned around, took a few steps, and was gone just like that. We could have sworn he just disappeared into thin air. To this day, it's one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had, and we've not gone back there since. We made uneasy jokes on the way home about him being a synth, but were still completely overcome with just the rawness, the way he seemed off and not quite human. However, I never saw the residence he mentioned, and I have no idea how he seemed to poof in and out of existence. My dad had told me a story a long time ago when I was around 9 years old about an experience he had. We lived next to an old 2-story house I believe was built in the 1800s. At that time, I was living in my great-grandmother's brother's house. From time to time he would go over to check on him, as he wasn't in the best of health. One night, he mentioned that when he went over there, the house was designed in such a way that his bed was located in the corner of the living room. So he walks in the front door, and he sees, sitting in his bed looking directly at him, not saying a word, this elf-looking person with pointy ears and wearing circa old-timey pajamas with a cap with a ball on the end. He tried speaking, and it kept staring him down. He said he got chills and backed out of the house real fast and went back home. Later he asked the owner, "Hey, I came by last night. Where did you get those pajamas? I've never seen any like that before." He's like, "What are you talking about? I was upstairs taking a shower. Nobody else was here but me." Ghost pretending to be me. For about 3 years my family has heard and seen me. It's not me. I have carbon monoxide meters that work, and nothing else to really explain it with. I've heard myself singing to my daughter while she's asleep. It freaked me out, but it did not bother me. My husband saw me in the living room looking at the hallway while he walked past, but he said he knew it was not me, as I was washed out looking and pale. He said it felt off. Another time they were walking down the stairs of the apartment I was inside, and they heard me call out from the top floor, "Come back." He looked at my daughter, who was walking back upstairs to me. He said, "Let's go." That was not Mummy. She and he hear me call out or say stuff when I'm not there, like "Come here," their names, what they're doing, "Come look at this," and nicknames. My daughter has seen me in places and will come to me and ask how I teleported. She's convinced I can do this now. Last night my husband was napping and said he thought I came to check on him, but after he saw me wearing a red jumper, I don't wear anything red, but my husband does. He knew it wasn't me. It came towards the bed, and then it rushed out. I was playing a game with a headset on at that point. I said to him, I think it got confused about what I normally wear. The thing is, I'm not really bothered about it, which is weird. There's been very loud banging in our loft recently, and whenever I enter our bedroom, it sounds like two drumsticks being hit together, but it's coming from the loft. I don't know what to do. My family is freaked out, but I'm not. Should I be worried? Should I do something? I was driving home alone one early fall night about 10 years ago. It was still a little light in the sky but just late enough to put on headlights, and I was stopped at an intersection on a residential street, big enough to have a red light but no one else there at this time of night. A guy is walking down the sidewalk, the only other person in sight, and turns and walks into the crosswalk in front of me. He's a completely ordinary looking dude, white, about 25-ish, wearing khaki shorts and a hoodie, a pretty normal fashion combo here in Pittsburgh, with a messenger bag slung over his shoulder. At least he's pretty normal looking until he steps into my headlights. And then there's no longer flesh on his legs. They're bonkers. Skeletal. Clearly and unmistakably bare bones. As in, I can see my headlights shining between the tibia and the fibula as he walks. I can see the femur up until it disappears into his shorts. His stride doesn't slow down at all. He doesn't look in my direction. He's just walking like it's completely normal for all the flesh to disappear from your legs as soon as you step into the headlights. My windshield is clear. It's not raining or foggy, and I have a completely unimpeded view of his bony legs. I haven't been drinking. I'm not under the influence of any kind of drugs. I just watch him in wordless astonishment as he walks through the crosswalk, and the moment he steps out of my headlights, his legs are completely normal again. There's enough ambient light that I can see the flesh on them. He doesn't look back and never pays me any attention. Just keep on walking down the street like nothing happened at all. So I have no idea what happened there, no idea what I was seeing, or what he was, but I know I got a glimpse of something that wasn't normal or human. I think I saw 2D shadow beings pretending to be people, and they noticed us. I've debated sharing this for a long time because I honestly don't have a clean explanation for it, and it still makes me uncomfortable thinking about it. This happened when I was 17, 13 years ago. I'm not saying this was paranormal for sure, but it was not normal, and it wasn't drugs or sleep paralysis. My girlfriend was with me and saw the same thing. For weeks before this, my girlfriend would wake me up in the middle of the night saying she saw something weird in the apartment building across the street. We lived on the second floor, and from our window, you could see straight into another building, about 3 floors with maybe 20 windows. I always brushed it off because I'm a heavy sleeper and honestly didn't want to deal with it. We'd just go back to sleep. One night I had just bought a new glass pipe with Bob Marley on it. I packed a bowl before bed and stood near the window. Out of nowhere the pipe felt insanely heavy, like it suddenly weighed way more than it should. It slipped straight out of my hand and shattered. I remember freezing and staring at the broken glass and weed on the floor. I didn't even look up. I shut the window and went to sleep, but the whole thing felt off. A few nights later around 3 a.m. we were walking home from my brother-in-law's place behind our house. As we were going up the stairs, my girlfriend told me to look. I glanced over, and at first it just looked like people partying late at night in one of the apartments. I shrugged it off. Then I looked again. The figures weren't normal people. They were pitch black, like shadows, but solid. They were dancing in a stiff side-to-side motion. Their arms were straight up at sharp angles coming out from where their necks should have been. No necks. No faces. One of them had a body shaped like a Z. The top part of the Z was the head and arms, and the bottom part was the legs. 2 of them were connected together, one bent forward in front of the other like they were grinding but still moving the same way as the rest. There were disco lights in the room, red, green, and blue, but the lights didn't touch them at all. It was like the light went around their bodies instead of on them. I whispered to my girlfriend asking if she was seeing what I was seeing. She was terrified. I told her I couldn't see their faces because they didn't have any. They honestly looked like stiff stick figures a little kid would draw. Above that apartment was another window with a man pacing on his phone under dim yellow lighting. Next to the dancers was another window with a guy sitting and reading a book with the same yellow light. At first that seemed normal. Then we felt it. We could feel them looking at us. All of them at once. They didn't stop dancing and they didn't turn toward us, but we knew they noticed us. It felt like standing in front of a huge crowd about to speak. That pressure in your chest, that dread. We both panicked and ran inside. It took maybe 10 to 15 seconds to get into our room. When we looked back out the window, everything was gone. No dancers. No movement. Just the disco lights are still flashing, and the same dim yellow lighting is in the other windows, like nothing happened. I was scared for years after this and did a lot of research. The closest thing I could come up with is that they were some kind of 2D or shadow beings, and the people in the other windows were some kind of disguise or mirage to blend in. I don't know why they were there or why they noticed us. I still think about it, and it still messes with me. Has anyone else seen anything like this? When I was a kid, I lived in a neighborhood where, if you went out the back of it, you went a few miles down a country road. 2 lanes, just farmland. My best friend and I enjoyed walking it, and at the end was a main road that took you to a few stores, restaurants, etc. A nice, almost rural area surrounded by bigger towns and cities. Sometimes we enjoyed walking our neighborhood or the back road at night. One night we ventured down the back road, and our attention went to something that appeared to be a man, but no damn way it was. He had a huge grin and was running at us, but his legs, I'll try to describe this, were coming up in such a way that they were almost spread, knees bent, and rotating. Like a crab or spider or something similar, yet he looked human. They would almost rotate/spin as they went forward. You could imitate the motion of his legs, but you couldn't run like this thing did. It was weird. Terrifying. We ran like hell, and we knew not to let it get near us. But I also knew we were safe once we entered our neighborhood. We immediately told my parents. They had no answers for us, but all these years later I remember this thing. Some kind of human hybrid? So this happened 2 nights ago. I was walking to my car after leaving my job. It was 9 p.m. I usually walk fairly quickly because it's dark and I have to park pretty far away from the entrance. On my way to the car, I look over to my right, where the dumpsters are, and see this tall, large framed man watching me. He was just standing there smoking a cigarette, so I wasn't too concerned at this point. I get closer to my car, and I suddenly get a feeling like I need to look over my shoulder because I feel like I'm being followed. Sure enough, he was about 5 steps behind me and stopped when I did. I had my car keys already in my hand before I walked out of the building, so I quickly unlocked my car and sprinted to it and jumped in. I look at the strange man and realize he never chased after me but was still watching me like a hawk. I start my car and proceed to pull away when the man turns to his side a little, and I realize he's completely flat. I've never seen anything like it. He looked normal from the front, but from the side, he was paper thin. It was almost like he disappeared when he turned. I made a circle around the building so I could go back to see if he was still there and to try to make sense of him being flat. He wasn't there when I pulled back around. I know I saw it. I stayed up all night that night looking for similar stories. Anyone else encountered a flat human before? I saw something that wasn't human. But I don't think it was my schizophrenia. So basically I have been diagnosed with schizophrenia for about a year and some change now, and in that time the only symptoms I've had would be auditory hallucinations, and sometimes when I close my eyes I see flashes of random things. But this only happens when I'm in bed at night when I'm trying to sleep, not yet falling asleep though. I have also seen 2 bugs, one pretty giant, crawling on my wall and next to my face, but to be fair, each time I had literally just opened my eyes from waking up, and they were literally the first thing I saw. So maybe it could be like a my body wasn't fully awake thing, I don't know, I'm not a psychiatrist. But none of this is actually my question. You see, my question actually goes back to when I was about 6 to 7. It was late at night, and I was sleeping in my room and had woken up to go pee. I had a bathroom attached to it. Now, on the wall that my bed was beside, there was also a door that led to the living room. So I had to get out of my bed, walk past the door to the living room, and go to the wall opposite my bed to reach the door that led to the bathroom. So everything is fine going to the bathroom. I turn on the lights, handle my business, turn off the lights, and head back for my bed. While I am crossing the area that has the door that leads to the living room, I turn my eye to the door. I see a humanoid figure that is paper white, with large pointy teeth forming a smile and what appear to be bullet holes in its head that, although I don't remember for sure, seem to be bleeding. Not processing what I had just seen, I turned my head back to look at my bed, but just as I did, I realized what I had just witnessed and immediately turned back to the door, staring at it in fear for my life. But nothing is there. I stare at that door for what seems like forever, and I only saw that humanoid figure for a split second, but I remember it so vividly even to this day. I know this sounds like a made-up story, but I promise on my life what happened to me is true. My question to all you lovely people who took the time to listen to this, do you think this could have been some early form of schizophrenia that peeped its ugly head for a split second? I should mention this is the only time before being diagnosed with schizophrenia that I had visually or auditorily had any experience like this in my childhood, or do you think this could be something more? Please let me know. Human imposters at the library. Around 10 years ago I used to work at a library whose front entrance was all glass. A wall of glass was about 20x45. One afternoon, a nasty thunderstorm broke out. To be on the safe side, we used the PA to announce that a trip to the basement was imminent. The storm was getting darker and louder, the town's tornado sirens started blasting. We hurried everyone down the basement steps. There were a few stragglers watching near the entrance as the sky turned black and winds picked up, rain lashed across the entrance, making it impossible to see out the front doors. Now the strange part. This terrible weather is normal around where I was, and everyone knows the drill. We practiced starting in kindergarten on how to stay safe. There were two people who just weren't moving toward the basement door. They started to walk straight out the front doors, smack into the maelstrom. They didn't even hesitate, whoosh. Out the door and gone. I didn't even have time to yell for them to stop. Hours passed, and we finally got the all-clear call, and everyone left the building. I went outside, and it was a mess of downed trees and power lines. I never thought much of this story until a friend said to me, "They probably weren't human in the first place. What human would walk out into a blinding storm as sirens are blaring?" Thoughts? So, I was born and raised in the California Bay Area, spent a lot of time in the Redwoods, and made frequent trips to Monterey and Santa Cruz. The first time I ever went to Santa Cruz as an adult without my parents, my friends and I stayed late to enjoy the boardwalk at night. As soon as it got dark, I felt like someone was watching me. No matter where I went or what I was doing, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I mentioned this to my mom a few days later. She went pale and told me to sit down, then told me a wild story. When I was around a year old, my parents decided to spend the day at the boardwalk. It got dark, and the wind kicked up, and Mom felt cold, so she told my father it was time to go. He had her wait with me while he walked back to where the car was parked and then drove over to pick us up. While she was waiting for him, holding me, a tall, pale man with long black hair approached us. Mom said he was striking, beautiful, but he instantly made her feel uncomfortable. He told her, "Your child is very special. May I hold her?" My mother, of course, refused, but he cut her off and said, "No. You don't understand. Your child is very special. I need to hold her. Please. Please, let me hold her." Mom said when he stepped closer and reached for her and she finally got a clear look at him in the streetlight, her heart nearly stopped. Everything in her screamed, "Not human." He grabbed me and tried to rip me out of her arms, and my mom started screaming for help. This was the early 80s, so instead of standing around filming, the people around her actually helped. The man turned and fled, and my mom said he moved so fast that it wasn't natural. It was like he just disappeared in front of her. I asked her what she thought he was, and she stared directly into my soul and softly said, "You know I'm a Christian, and I would never admit this to most people, but honey, that man was a vampire. I'm sure of it. Don't ever stay in Santa Cruz after dark ever again." She made me promise, and I've kept that promise. My mom is a very religious person. She would never normally say anything like that or admit to believing in such a thing. But that explains why I found books about vampires on her bookshelf as a kid. I was shocked when I found them. This woman legitimately reads the Bible every night before bed and fast forwards through kissing scenes on TV. She was specifically looking at legends from our area. I think she was trying to figure out who/what he was. A long time ago I was at a warehouse job while I looked for something that paid more. I was packing a trailer full of boxes with another guy. I kept to myself and was lost in a variety of inner thoughts. I realized that every time I thought of a topic he would make a remark that had to do with what I was thinking. This continued for a long time until I began to feel uneasy and question whether this guy was normal, psychic, or an alien. He then replied, "Do you believe in aliens? I think they're out there." He responded with a smirk and intense eye contact. It freaked me out, but I just kind of agreed that I do also believe in aliens and kept to myself. To this day, I still believe there was something different/special about that guy. Purple blue, devil horned, deformed humanoid. So first, some backstory. My dad and stepmom moved into a new house. I'm F14. Ever since we moved into this home, we've seen, heard, and felt a lot of strange and unexplainable things. All of my life I've experienced things, but this house is by far the most I've experienced. I will definitely share more about everything that's been going on, but for now I only have one small experience to share that's quite concerning and different from everything we've ever experienced. For the past couple months we have let my dad's sister, my aunt, and her girlfriend live in our trailer in our yard, big property. We've had a lot of issues with them, mostly small stuff, but recently though, my aunt and her girlfriend had a huge fight, and one thing led to another, and we ended up having to kick them out a few days later. Anyway, the point is my aunt and her girlfriend are no longer living with us, and they definitely did not leave on good terms with us. Now another to note is my aunt is Wiccan, this will be important later, and has gotten into some pretty messed up stuff. We have no reason to believe she ever did any rituals or stuff like that on our property, though. So now the real problem. Last night I heard many different sounds from outside my room, thumping, banging, footsteps, and even, at one point, screaming that seemed to just be ringing in my ears. My stepmom has also experienced this, so I know we can't both be crazy, right? Now all this is normal for our house, but that night it just felt different, darker even. The next day when my dad got home from work, he told us what had happened to him the night previous. Apparently he suddenly woke up, and a dark purple-blue humanoid man thing was standing directly above my stepmom. My dad described it as having horns like the devil, and there was blood dripping from its fingertips. Nothing was on the floor in the morning, though. He described it as evil, and the whole room's atmosphere felt evil. Of course, when he opened and closed his eyes, it had disappeared. My stepmom recounts feeling my dad suddenly look up and hearing him say something along the lines of "WTF is that?" She apparently felt the presence of something standing directly above her near her face. So obviously we all have questions. We've never felt unsafe in this house before, and according to my dad, this was evil. He's not one to lie about this kind of thing, and I definitely believe him. Now, I'm not very educated on Wiccan culture, but I definitely believe my aunt could and would do something to harm us, but I'm just not sure what. So if anyone knows anything that could help us, please by all means comment and let me know. Also, if anyone has any theories or similar experiences, I'd definitely appreciate hearing them in the comments below. A mischievous black shadow tormented me when I was a child. The memory of these events is still clear years later. It really frightened me at the time, but looking back, it wasn't evil at all, it just wanted to play and seemed lonely. I think it could have been the spirit of a child itself. When I was 8, my bedroom and bed were arranged such that if I lay on my left-hand side, I could see the landing and stairs. My bedroom was adjacent to the bathroom and toilet, so I could see when people went up and down stairs and to the bathroom. I had a 4-year-old sister and a newborn brother. My sister had her own bedroom, and the baby slept in the parents' bedroom. My sister would go to bed at least an hour before me, and the landing light would be left on until parents went to bed. One night I was lying on my right-hand side trying to go to sleep when I felt a poke in my back. I spun round and saw a small dark shadow run out of my room, across the landing, and down the stairs. I presumed that it was my little sister, so I went downstairs and complained to my mom and dad that she had poked me and how come she was still up. Mom took me back upstairs and showed me that sis was still asleep in bed. I thought she must have snuck back into her bed, but she was deeply asleep. The following nights I tried to always lie on my left so that I could see who was poking me. Nothing happened, so I went back to normal. A few nights later the poking happened again. I jumped out of bed, ran into my sister's room, and shouted at her to stop poking me. This woke her up, and she started screaming and crying. I was told off by my mom and sent back to bed. As I lay there watching the door, I saw the small dark shadow slowly slip through the door, cross the landing, and head down the stairs. Every now and then, when I lay on my right, the poking would happen again, and I'd see the shadow running away. I tried to tell my parents, but they thought that I must have been dreaming, but I knew I wasn't. This continued sporadically until my brother needed his own bedroom and I moved to a new bedroom in the loft space. My sister moved into my old bedroom, and he moved into her old bedroom. Bizarrely, years later at her wedding reception, she told the story of me tormenting her by poking her in the back some nights when she was trying to go to sleep in my old bedroom. I never did this. Was it the same small dark shadow? When I was about 13 in the late 90s, we lived on an island just off the mainland and connected by a traffic bridge. We used to walk to the store and walk back, which was a fair walk but nice, as it was along the beach. On a few occasions as the sun was setting, we'd see this older man, always dressed in a neat white set consisting of a top and pants. He was always in the same area, and he would consistently turn to look at us and greet us. I think he said things a few times, but I forget his exact words now. But what was strange was that he always had a glow around him. Like some sort of light emanating out of him. Like, I know he was dressed in white, and it may have been light reflecting, but I have never seen that with anyone else in all my years since. My family believed he was some kind of spiritual being. He always had a very warm demeanor and gentle smile, and you got the feeling he was all-knowing and above the world's pettiness. Like a very pure feeling. So, a little context, I live in Arizona, so it gets really hot out during the day. Because of this, I tend to avoid going out during the day and only really leave the house once the sun starts to set. I used to visit one of my friends pretty often. She didn't live too far from me, but as a shortcut I would walk along the train tracks near my house and take it all the way down to her place. The main thing with this was that there were no lights along this stretch of track. There was absolutely no light for approximately a mile and a half. I didn't really have an issue with this, since I quite enjoy the solitude and I can see relatively well even in the middle of the night, so I would take this path every time I went to visit. That track is where this takes place. This track was always empty, and I never encountered anyone on my walks before this. Anyways, I was walking home probably around 11 p.m. when I heard the sound of the train coming. This was odd, considering the train ran at 6 a.m., but whatever. I stepped off the track and walked along beside it, occasionally glancing back to look for the train that never appeared. At one point, I stopped and watched the track in confusion when someone literally ice cold and wet grabbed my hand and pulled me a few steps further from the track. Now, this place is relatively open and covered in rocks and gravel on a steep hill, and I know damn well I would have seen or heard him even if he came up from behind me. I didn't even have a chance to say anything before he told me, very quietly, "Just keep walking, girl, don't look back anymore," before continuing to basically drag me down the path. At this point, I'm scared shitless, just sort of staring at this man, who, might I add, was bloody and tall AF, as he dragged me along the path that I always took to get home. Everything in my body told me to scream and run, but I just couldn't. Like, even when I tried to yell or speak, I could only manage a whisper, like I wasn't even in control of my voice, if that makes sense. He kept glancing back at me, and he sort of looked like a mixture between nervous and pissed, but he was smiling the whole time. I kept switching between this dude is going to end me and I think this man knows something I don't. And now that it's been a few years, I definitely think it was the latter. I don't know who the hell he was, but everything about him screamed not human. He dragged me all the way to my street, stopping just before the light of the streetlights, and told me I was a stupid child who was simply lucky. He said to never walk the tracks from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. and, if I ever heard the train at night, to just ignore it. Then he called me stupid again and told me to go home. Literally never saw him again, but I did heed his warning, so that might be why. 10 years ago, my papa and I picked a lady up on the highway. She said she was hiking all over to see friends and family and honestly just seemed very strange. She had these beautiful golden eyes that mesmerized me entirely but also unnerved me. They weren't yellow or evil looking eyes, they were genuinely golden and unlike any eyes I've ever seen. When I complimented them, she just smiled and said, "They are pretty, aren't they?" This lady unsettled me, and my papa admitted later she unsettled him too, but she didn't set off any genuine alarm bells. It was like I was in the presence of someone who could do me in but had decided not to. We bought her lunch and dropped her off at a park to rest, and I would have chalked everything up to contact lenses and coincidence if it weren't for the fact that we drove 2 miles home and this lady somehow beat us to our house. I shit you not, we left her waving on a park bench, and then she was suddenly walking down our road not a minute later, ahead of our car. She looked back at us, smiled, and then kept walking on. She wasn't even going in the direction she originally said she was going. She was just going down our road in the opposite direction to her supposed destination. It was spooky as hell, but again, I also got the feeling she meant us no harm. My grandma thought she might be an angel when we told her about it, but I always wondered if she was fae. She never asked our names and never gave hers. She also thanked us for the ride and food, and the way she spoke in general was so peculiar. Neither of us could explain it. The night something wearing my grandpa's face tried to enter my room. This happened Sunday in the early morning hours, and I still haven't fully shaken it. I know the difference between a dream and something more, and this was definitely more. Before bed, I felt it, a thick, eerie presence I couldn't explain. I was staying at my grandma's house, just across the hall from where my grandpa's ashes are kept. The air felt heavy. Wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just knew something was off. So I prayed. Not just any prayer, but the Lord's Prayer, followed by a very intentional prayer for protection. It felt necessary. Then came the encounter. I woke up standing at the doorway of my bedroom, not wandering or confused like in a normal dream, but completely aware. Lucid, like I was awake, but I knew my body was asleep in bed. I knew exactly where I was, and that's when I saw it. Standing just beyond the threshold was something that looked like my grandpa. But it wasn't him. The eyes were too large. And it didn't speak. It just stared at me, predatory. I didn't feel peace or comfort. I felt watched. Hunted. And then I realized it wasn't just standing there. It was waiting. That door between us wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. I could feel it, whatever this thing was, it needed permission to come in. And here's the strangest part, I knew it wanted me to speak. Not just react. Speak. And I knew deep in my spirit that anything I said, anything other than invoking the authority of Jesus, would have granted it access. That's how thin the line was. The Bible talks about doors a lot. Genesis 4:7 says, "Sin is crouching at the door, its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." That's exactly how it felt. This wasn't a nightmare. This was a spiritual standoff. I believe it was a familiar spirit, a type of demonic entity that mimics loved ones who have passed. The Bible warns about this. Deuteronomy 18:11 condemns communicating with the dead, and 2 Corinthians 11:14 reminds us that even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. This thing was trying to confuse me. Trick me. Bait me into saying anything that would give it legal ground. But I knew it wasn't my grandpa. And I knew better than to answer it casually. So I spoke. "In Jesus' name, I rebuke you." Once. Twice. 3 times, each time louder, firmer, and more sure of the authority I was standing in. And it couldn't move. It didn't cross the threshold. It just stood there, smirking, tilting its head, almost annoyed, but still challenging me, like it was daring me to drop my guard and give it a foothold. Then everything turned white. Blinding. And I felt myself pulled backwards, snapped right back into bed. I woke up instantly. Heart racing. But somehow. Safe. Protected. And the number 3? That wasn't random. In Scripture, 3 is a symbol of completion and spiritual power, the Trinity. Jesus rising on the 3rd day, Peter's 3 denials, and later, his 3 affirmations. I believe by rebuking it 3 times, I sealed whatever door it was trying to come through. This experience shook me, but it didn't break me. And now I can't help but wonder. My grandma once said she saw Grandpa after he passed. But what if what she saw wasn't really him? The Bible says the dead don't come back to visit us. Luke 16:26 speaks of a great chasm fixed between the living and the dead. Isaiah 8:19 warns, "Should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living?" Maybe what came to her wore a different mask but had the same goal. Christian religion aside, as that's my personal faith and I'm not forcing that belief onto anyone, I genuinely want to hear what others think. From all perspectives. What did I encounter? Has anyone else experienced something like this, especially with spirits that imitate loved ones? This has opened my eyes in a way I never expected. Yes, my ex-best friend. She messed around with the dark arts. I'm pagan and practice nature magic, but I'm not that well versed in demonology. She attached something to her called a servitor, like on purpose via a ritual. My ex-best friend is not a good person, she is unpleasant, and I do not use that word lightly, she is a sociopath. She has mental health issues and a legitimate trauma history. I think this entity made these traits worse but also made her more powerful. She was a skilled practitioner to begin with. This thing needed to be fed, she said. There were always unexplained, very bad, unlucky things happening to the people around her, or they'd get very sick, particularly her friends. Other gifted people who weren't as close to her picked up on this entity too. By the time I stopped being friends with her, I felt spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically sucked dry. In my opinion, she lost control of the entity, which gradually consumed parts of her soul. She would have these insane rage meltdowns, and her eyes legit just went black, and she was out of control. She growled, screamed, and physically attacked me. I was often worried for my safety. I don't know how to put it, but the look on her face was truly non-human. There is something not human out there. I was about 9 years old living in Suriname. At the time, and it probably still rings true today, it was a poor country with one major city, and the rest of the area was very rural. We lived in one of those rural areas, which you can't even call a town, with our closest neighbor in front of our house, and the next neighbor is miles away. We also lived next to the rainforest. There is no reason for anyone to drive by our area. There is nothing but a dirt road and bushes and trees all around us. We also didn't have TV or any entertainment at the house. My siblings and I would spend our free time reading books, playing with toys, or riding our bikes. And for years, it remained that way. A quiet place with few to no visitors. One day, I saw something that changed everything for me. Background about me: I always had experiences with ghosts as a kid and still do, rarely, as an adult. I don't seek them out. I had my hair pulled, legs scratched, and words whispered to me when no one was around. I just get used to it, and these are rare occurrences, so I don't think about it much. Back to the story: I was watching the yard dogs play when I saw a white male jogging past our house on the dirt road. The dirt road leads to a dead end. I have never seen this person before. My neighbors are Indian, and they live alone. I asked my mom about that man. She didn't see him and didn't know who I was talking about. He was wearing jogging clothes. I remember he had shorts on. The dogs are guard dogs, but they did not bark or notice him. I couldn't see his face. I didn't think much about him until a few days later, when I saw him again, jogging on the dirt road passing the house. I immediately ran to my bike and decided to follow him. Again, dogs were quiet for some reason. I don't know why I followed him. It wasn't curiosity. I didn't tell my mom or anyone, which I usually do. I just left with my bike, going slowly behind him, probably about 12 feet away or so. I didn't hear any footsteps. When you run on the dirt road, you will hear something. Gravel, dirt, something. I didn't hear anything. He didn't turn around. He didn't acknowledge me, even though I was obviously following closely behind him. I should have turned back. What was wrong with me? I couldn't stop myself. Something tells me to keep following him. We both said nothing to each other. We made it to the dead end of the dirt road. He keeps running, into the grass and straight towards the trees. The grass is tall, about mid-thigh to hip height. No sounds. No rustling. The grass barely bends around him as he is trampling through the grass. He kept going. I got off my bike. As I was about to take one foot forward to step on the grass to follow him, I heard my mom's voice to my left, loud and clear as day, calling my name, Maggie. I turned around and said, "What?" No one was there. No one was behind me. I turned back facing forward. That man was gone too. No trace of him. I was alone. I felt a deep chill inside and immediately hopped on my bike and rode home as fast as I could. When I got home, my mom was cooking. She never left the house. And I never saw that man again. I truly believe that thing was not human. I believed I was charmed somehow, lured out from my house on purpose. That was not a ghost or spirit. There are some entities in this world that can't be understood or explained. I hope I never run into that again. Decades later, I met with a psychic medium who told me there is a guardian spirit protecting me, an older woman, but I don't think it's my late great-grandmother. Not sure how much of that is true, but something snapped me out of it to save me, and I'm forever grateful for it. I need help identifying a non-human entity. I'm 28 years old. I recently moved into a new house. It's an old Victorian home that's well over 100 years old. Everything was going well for about the first week since moving in, but then I saw the woman for the first time. I was sitting on the couch in the living room one night, and I smelled a strong sulfur smell. It was so strong it burned my nose. I looked around and then I saw her standing in the corner of the room. I saw a figure that appeared to be a young woman, approximately 22 years old. She had long black hair and she was very pale. She was wearing, a black long-sleeved shirt and jeans with a pair of just normal tennis shoes. She was looking down at her feet, and I said, "Hello there. Who are you?" She looked up at me and smiled. I will say I got a very creepy feeling when she did. I then asked if she was human, and she just giggled and shook her head no. After that she disappeared. Since then I've been seeing her on a regular basis in the house, always accompanied by that very strong sulfur smell. She'll either be standing at the top of the stairs or in the corner of the room I am in. She's always just standing there, and she always smiles and waves at me, then disappears. She's done nothing threatening towards me, but I do always feel a very creepy energy when I see her. I have no idea what she is or why she's in my home. I don't know if she's dangerous. Like I said, she hasn't been threatening towards me. Should I talk to her more and ask questions? If anybody has any ideas as to what she is and if she's dangerous, I would appreciate it. I saw a ghostly figure in my mirror that looked like my brother. So I sleep right in front of my mirror. I know people say that's bad because it's a portal for ghosts or something like that, but I've never really thought that mattered. Until a few days ago. I was sleeping in bed having an average dream when I woke up. After a minute of lying in bed, I became aware of something in my mirror. It looks like my little brother. I think to myself, oh, he's in my room? Then I look over to see no one is in my room. But I look in the mirror and he's still there. I wasn't scared for some reason. Like I knew it wasn't going to hurt me. So I got up and walked out of my room like normal and never saw it again. This isn't the only time I've had an interaction with something that looked like my little brother but wasn't him. A few months back, I saw something that looked like my little brother watching me sleep, and when I finally got up to go to the bathroom, he was sleeping on the couch, and there was no way he could have made it there without me knowing. No, this wasn't sleep paralysis. I was able to move as I pleased. Mind you, my little brother is alive and well, so it's not his spirit or anything. I'm very skeptical, but I have a question. Are there spirits that can shape-shift/disguise themselves to look like other people? And if so, are they bad to have around? My friend and I just encountered something we don't think is human. Can anyone clear this up for us? I, 16 female, and my friend, 15 female, let's call her A, met up around 6:30 p.m. tonight to catch up or just mess about for a while, as we were both bored. Around 6:50 we walked to a popular park around 10 minutes away from where we had originally met up. This park is locked after 5 p.m., and there is only one small gate on the side of the fence open at all hours. There are no other exits or entrances along the entire perimeter of the park. We both have our flashlights on, looking for a bench, as this is the UK and the sun doesn't exist past 5:30 this time of year. We sat down on a bench and heard the distant sound of boys, some young, some teenage, playing around in the actual playground on the swing. There is no one else around at this time. I and A get lost in a conversation about summer, other people, and the weather, the usual British conversation topics, when I notice a lady has sat down on a bench around 15 feet away from us. The woman was clearly defined, her silhouette could be seen from the street lamps around the park. I watch her closely as she stands up and talks into what seems like a phone. We did not hear a phone ring. She walks back and forth across the width of the path, talking as she does so while A and I observe her more closely. Just your average smackhead, a suggestion was made, and I quickly agreed. Like I said, this is the UK. Both of us shine our flashlights in her direction and see her twist her body around to face us. She let out this cackle. I'd like to call it a laugh, but it was a full-on villain cackle. My friend gets creeped out as we can see this woman walk in our direction. We leave through the only exit available, and my friend suggests watching her through the railings. As soon as I step over the gate, we can no longer hear her. We peer through the fences and see no sign of her whatsoever. We follow the edges of the railings and search with our flashlights for this woman, as there was no possible way for her to exit undetected. I even forced A to come back into the park with me for a closer look. We watched around the perimeter and could see no sight nor sound of her. This spooked us, as the way the lady was acting was very weird, and she honestly seemed like a drug addict, but even so, there was no way for her to vanish into thin air. We are now sitting at a bus stop typing this up, hoping for any sense to be made of what we have seen. Can anyone give us some clarity or advice? The time I saw something that was not human. It was a long time ago, when I was around 10 to 11 years old. It's the most prominent memory I have to this day. I am certain it wasn't a hallucination, given that the circumstances were much more casual and I do not have any mental illness. It was a normal day with me, my mother, and my younger brother going to the park in the afternoon. Me, being an energetic child, was excited to go play, and I had gotten ready early, so I left my apartment early and ran towards the staircase. After I had turned a corner and when my apartment door was out of sight, I heard footsteps approaching and assumed it was my younger brother catching up to me. My brother turns the corner, and he ignores me and runs down the stairs with a smile I had never seen on my brother before. I try to call out to him, but he has disappeared down the stairs, and my brother replies to me, calling out his name behind me. I was extremely confused. I asked my brother and my mother if they had seen anything weird, and they didn't give me a reliable answer. This was the start of one of the many experiences I've had that left me with questions I doubt I'll ever learn the answers to. There's an evil spirit disguised as a 13-year-old boy in my house. So let me begin by saying that I have had no personal experiences with this, but my girlfriend and a handful of friends have witnessed this, thing. My girlfriend started seeing the spirit of a little boy in the house, and initially, we thought nothing of it, assuming he might just be stuck in limbo. That's definitely not the case. Things started to get weird a little over a year ago. Our friend Amanda went to the bathroom, and when she was walking down the hallway towards the bathroom, the boy walked through her. She told me she felt completely drained and had a feeling of dread, which was the first red flag. He frequently hangs out in that part of the hallway near the bathroom. The next thing he started doing was standing there and staring at people with a very cold, hateful gaze, as I was informed. Let me add that he appears in the size and attire of a little boy but has the face of an old man, whose stare is even worse to think of. This leads me to believe that he is a bad spirit in disguise. Soon after, he started doing things like chasing my 6-year-old daughter around. Not only is he chasing her, but he is also trying to reach for her while doing so. He does not pay much attention to her brother, who is not my biological son, but I include him in all family activities, so now that he appears to be targeting children, this raises another concern. 6 months ago we had our daughter. It started staring at her while she was lying down. It started following my girlfriend whenever she carried her anywhere. He tried pushing my girlfriend while holding her. He also pushed her swing, which caused it to rock pretty hard, according to what my girlfriend told me. Now here we are today. I'm looking to move and get a bigger house with a yard and such. He started appearing again. He's been making loud, noticeable noises in the house, which I can hear now. My girlfriend said she dropped a basket of clothes in the hallway that he hangs out by, after it felt like someone pushed it down hard. Last night I heard a banging and rattling window pane. I thought it was the wind rattling the window in the back stairs door that leads into the laundry room. Well, when I went to check on it and shut the lights off, my girlfriend immediately said, after I walked out of the laundry room, that he ran into our bedroom where our daughter sleeps. Apparently he's scared of me because he left as soon as I walked in and said, "Get out." I have been challenging him to show himself and do the same stuff to me that he does to them and our friends. He won't show himself. I'm practically begging. I'm beginning to get tired of his presence because it's scaring my girlfriend and our friends. I'm looking for any answers or advice. Although it wasn't an alien encounter, the ongoing conversation about other dimensions made me reflect on an experience I had. I and my older brother saw a ghost. I had seen inexplicable things once or twice after, like lights turning on by themselves or shadows, but the ghost was right in front of us. The story is over 20 years old now, but I remember it vividly because despite me wanting to believe, I am skeptical and will look for any logical explanation. We were at home, on the second floor. One side had the rooms, there was the stairs, and the other side had a large area with a snooker table. While my friend and I were getting ready to go out, my brother was waiting on us, playing snooker by himself. I got ready before my friend, she was in the shower, and I went chatting with my brother. I was resting my arms on the rails on one side of the stairs, my brother was right in front of me on the other side, also close to the rails on his side. Out of the blue, a woman, coming from nowhere, went down the stairs in front of us, like she passed right between me and my brother. She was not in a rush, she was just walking down the stairs like a normal person would. She was dressed in a fancy but antique dress and had half tight, half loose hair, she was blonde and looked like a Sepia movie, and her steps made no noise. She did not seem to acknowledge us at all. It was not a shadow or a presence. It looked like a real person had come out of a Sepia movie. The stairs were in an L shape, so eventually she was out of our sight, so my brother ran down with the snooker cue because there was a random person inside our house. We were sure it was a person, we didn't believe in the paranormal. We lived in a coastal town, our house had sliding glass doors on the inside, and the outside was decorated with see-through metal doors. I don't know the name in English, I am Brazilian, the metal doors were locked, there was nowhere the woman could have gone. There was no way anyone could have left the house, nor was there any way for her to be on the second floor with us without us seeing her. It's been 20 years, and it still bothers me that I can't explain why or how. I experienced a third-person view from what I believe was something not human or animal. I know this sounds strange or made up. I'm a 44-year-old male, and nothing like this has ever happened to me. I'm not into the supernatural or spirits. Just a regular Midwest guy. What happened? I live by a cemetery, about an acre or two of woods separate from my backyard. I was burning brush at 11:30 p.m. I went outside to spray water and douse the hot coals. No biggie, I love my backyard. It's secluded, I've never had anything weird happen. Suddenly, I find myself viewing my surroundings from a third-person perspective at the tree line, as if something is observing me from the side. Not an above angle, straight side view. The view moves forward until it's 10 feet away, then suddenly I'm back to a first-person view, using the hose. It made me look in the direction it happened from towards the cemetery. I felt no fear, but I didn't really realize what happened. Also, I noticed no sound, no crickets, or any other night bug or animal sounds. Complete quote. I went inside and thought about it and confirmed, yeah, that just happened. It gave me goosebumps. Can anyone explain this or have it happen? It was not me looking at me. It was definitely something else looking at me. I can't find anything on the internet describing this. I'm at a loss and kind of spooked, I could use some answers. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I look forward to your response. Used to do a lot of walking/hiking alone, Female, UK. I always carried a heavy walking stick with me. It wasn't specifically for safety, but I always had it. Decided to go for a short walk, a rough 5-mile loop, through the woods. Walking along, feeling fine, then I see a guy up ahead on the trail. He's just standing there, staring into the heavier trees that the path ran next to. Okay, kind of weird, but I keep walking. At this point, I was close enough and making enough noise on the gravel path that he must have known I was there, yet he continued to stare off into the trees. I suddenly get the most stomach cramping, leg shaking fear running through me. I literally stopped walking. It hit me so hard. But I felt like I didn't want to turn around and walk back, as he would then be behind me and it would have been obvious I was avoiding him. So I gripped my stick hard and went to walk past. As I got close, I said the usual, "Hi, how are you?" And he slowly turned around and looked at me. His eyes were glazed and blank, and his body wasn't moving at all. He was standing stock still. And he suddenly looked directly into my eyes and, after a weird pause, said, "Hi, lovely day, isn't it?" I muttered a reply and sped up to walk past. I kept turning my head to the side as if I were looking about but was actually trying to see out of the corner of my eye if he started following me. Eventually I couldn't hold back, and maybe 30 meters past him, I fully turned around. He was still standing stock still, looking at me. His hands were hanging down, and he was staring without any movement. And then, he slowly started to turn back to the side and went back to staring into the woods. I watched him for maybe 30 seconds and then started walking again. I was hurrying along, not even trying to be subtle about it, but after a bit I turned back around and he had vanished. I had no intention of hanging around, so I held my stick like a weapon and rushed on down the loop. I didn't have any signal, or I'd have kept someone on the line to talk to. Walked the last few miles practically at a run. I frantically looked around and into the thicker trees, hoping to find him there. Made it back to my car and leapt in, locked the doors, and tore out of there. Truly one of the most unsettling things that's ever happened. And for context, I have personal experience with psychosis. He was not blanked out or in psychosis. He just had the most disturbing aura about him. I haven't been back to that area in nearly 3 years. In the late 90s my girlfriend and I were in a dive bar in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. It was a dirty little hole in the wall across from the Canal Place Mall. This couple walks in a little before midnight, and they are immaculate. I've never seen people like this. She is both blonde and perfectly proportioned, with flawless skin. Not a wrinkle, spot, or blemish on either of them. They were practically glowing. Their facial features were perfectly symmetrical, and you don't realize how weird that is until you see it. Literally no one has a perfectly symmetrical face. And their hair was perfectly styled. Not a single hair out of place. They had preppy tennis clothes that were so white, clean, and crisp they basically shined in the light. Which is a good trick in a city as dirty as New Orleans. They ordered drinks and sat at a table by the window. They didn't really seem to talk much, just looked around at everything. My girlfriend whispered to me, "Those are the weirdest people I've ever seen." The more I looked at them, the more I began to believe they were mannequins from the mall across the street just having a night out on New Year's Eve. When they got up and left, everyone in the bar stopped talking for a second and watched them walk out. It was surreal. Yes, a couple of times. One was after a night out, in a sketchy town I lived in the UK in my early 20s. I went to a takeaway, got my food, and sat down at a communal bench/table. It was pretty busy. 2 youngish Arab-looking guys sat opposite me. One of them could talk, one of them was mute. The mute guy could only make weird noises/sounds, but the guy sat next to him knew what he was trying to say. When I looked into the mute guy's eyes, they were black, like no white to the eye at all, except for some whitish/gray tinge to where the iris would be. It kind of looked like a cataract. I knew straight away and avoided looking at him but was cordial with the guy next to him that was speaking to me but kind of tried to shut down his conversation. I got frustrated at one point with all the questions he was asking, and I just said, "I know your friend there isn't human." I could see from his reaction that he didn't expect that comment from me, and then he got up and left. Really bizarre. But yeah, I knew he wasn't human. Another one was at a party. There was a weird goth/emo but cute looking girl that was very quiet but actively socializing with people there. I had my camera with me, I was a photography student at the time. I took a few shots of the people at the party, and as I was flicking through the photo previews on the camera screen, I saw her true face. It was something I'd seen before, so I wasn't shocked exactly, but I exclaimed out loud, and she looked right at me as I did, and others sat around us and were like, "What?" I looked at her, and she just shook her head at me with a pleading look in her eye, and I understood. I just told the group it was nothing, They went back to drinking and talking, and I moved over to speak with her. I showed her the pictures of her, zoomed in on her face, and asked her what she was. She obviously didn't tell me, but she acknowledged that was her true face, and it wasn't a glitch with the camera, lighting. There were multiple photos with other people in the shot, and it was only her face that looked like that, so I knew it wasn't a glitch, but I appreciated her honesty. We spoke a bit. I knew she was dangerous, but I also knew she wasn't a danger to me, so I wasn't scared of her, which is why I felt okay engaging with her. She was just there to party like the rest of us. I let her watch me delete the photos from the memory card on the camera and said I wasn't going to tell anyone, which she appreciated. I stayed a little while longer at the party but left early. Never saw her again. Almost human. This happened a while ago, but I still have not been able to explain it or really discuss it with anyone because I'm not sure of what happened, but here goes. A few years ago I went to Bruges with my family, and we were only there for a day, really. We had been walking around, and I don't know exactly when or how, but a woman joined us. She said that she had been solo traveling, and since she was from Latin America like us, my dad decided that we should invite her to eat with us because she was alone. Anyway, we all went somewhere to eat, and the whole time she just made me extremely uncomfortable. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but there was something insincere about her, as if she were almost human but not quite. She had this huge smile that showed all her teeth, and she would barely blink. I actually can't remember seeing her blink at all. She would also look at you so intensely, and it wasn't just her appearance, her way of speaking was so off. It was like she was trying to imitate what a normal person would sound like. The words she used seemed so unnatural and weirdly put together. Like a puzzle with missing pieces. She would also arouse this anger from me. I told my dad I didn't want her there, but he said to be compassionate. I'm not normally easily angered, and I like to think I have a pretty big heart, but there was just something about her. She also told us about her life, and honestly none of it made sense. I cannot recall any specific details, but I do remember feeling quite unsettled at the time. Throughout the entire experience, the most persistent thought I had was the unsettling notion that she is not human. That experience has not occurred to me either before or since, so I am uncertain about its nature. I write this in hopes that someone has any answers for me out there, maybe a similar experience. Let me know. I once worked in a grocery store, and this little old lady came up to me to ask me where to find ice cream cones. She looked and appeared completely normal, but I got this totally bizarre feeling being near her. The closest I can get to describing it, this is going to sound weird, is like in the first Lord of the Rings movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, where the hobbits first encounter one of the Nazgul, and that swirling vortex warps the forest path before it shows up. If a vortex were a person, that's what I felt coming off of this old woman. I felt perfectly fine before she came up to me, and I felt perfectly fine again afterwards. But when she came up to me, it was like being hit with a wave of unreality, like I was staring into something impossible and feeling vertigo. It was the most bizarre feeling I've ever had. I don't know what the heck it was or why, but as soon as she walked away, I felt normal again. I used to live in the hills with my mother when I was 16. A woman lived next door with her 2 kids, we were friends and hung out. One day, my mom, dad, and I were walking up the path that led to the apartment block. The path was steep stairs up the hill and small cement platforms to sit and catch a breath every 50 to 60 stairs. It was a shortcut if you were not driving up to the apartment complex from the main town road, which was some 500 meters below. The whole path was surrounded by small trees and shrubs. It was 7 in the evening, and as we talked and moved up the stairs, it was still quite bright because the sun was not expected to set for another hour. When we reached halfway, we met the neighbor lady. She was going the opposite way. Nothing seemed wrong or alarming about her. We chatted for about 5 to 6 minutes. She asked my mother to accompany her to pick something up from someone down the road, suggesting it would be a nice walk in the evening breeze. However, my mother had to prepare for a trip since we were leaving early the next day. She apologized. At that time, the lady said, "It's okay, but the breeze is so good, it's like you can walk up and down on this stretch forever, and the breeze wouldn't let you get tired," which I found weird. We parted, and she went down. We came up and reached the building 10 minutes later, and there she was, sitting and talking to another neighbor on the lawn. I kid you not, I saw my mother and my father, and to this day I can't put a finger on what expression they wore. It was shock, fear, disbelief, and panic all at once. They knew it wouldn't make sense if they just confronted her in a weird way, so they asked me to hold my tongue and just listen, and I did. My mom approached her and started talking. Pleasantries were exchanged, and she asked her how her day was, what she did, where her kids were, and if she went to town today. She didn't leave the apartment complex that day at all, She was at home with some people from an animal shelter, planning for an event later in the week. Her kids were helping her with that and 7 to 8 more people. We saw them all, confirmed, and made sure she didn't step out that day. Once my parents had completed their inquiries and were assured that she had not left at all, we returned home, sat down, and found it difficult to comprehend the situation. My mom and dad are very rational people, but that day no amount of logic worked. There was no solution. They discussed it for an hour or so, and after the discussion, it was decided that we would pray, we would be cautious, we would make sure to reach out immediately if we sensed danger, we wouldn't talk about the incident anymore, and Mom would let the neighbor lady know when we came back from the trip. We came back, and Ma told her what happened. She was in disbelief too and scared but kept her calm. We moved out 3 years later. Nothing happened in those 3 years, but I never could bring myself to be in her presence for more than a few minutes, as I was always reminded of that evening. This just happened to me a few weeks ago, and the feeling has been surreal. I was driving to work and pulled over in a McDonald's parking lot in Leesburg, Virginia. This particular McDonald's shares a parking lot area with Sheetz. It's about 4:30 a.m. I like to ride with the sunroof open and the heat turned up. I am sitting in the car with the sunroof wide open, and I have just opened the McDonald's app to take advantage of their buy one, get one special on breakfast sandwiches. This guy comes up and taps my window. I turn to him and roll the windows down. Now in any other situation in the world, I would have never rolled down the window, but for some unexplained reason I did. He had on a hoodie and a scarf covering the lower part of his face, just his nose and eyes were visible. He asked if I had a few dollars, and I told him no, I didn't. I asked if he was hungry, and he said yes. I offered to walk with him to McDonald's to get some food. I rolled up the window and got out of the car. When I got out, I noticed he had on good clothes. Black pants, nice gray and black sneakers, a black jacket over a hoodie, and gloves. I'm a 45-year-old straight man, but this guy had the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen. They were captivating. I asked if he wanted something from Sheetz instead of McDonald's, or if we could just go into McDonald's. He said Sheetz are good. We started walking towards Sheetz, and I asked him what his name was. This guy stops, turns to me with the most caring, sincere look, and says, "Nicoli." I said, "Hi, Nicoli, it's so nice to meet you." The whole time, my mind is going crazy, because it does not feel like I'm in the presence of a human. I can't even put it into words. We walk in, and I tell him to get anything he wants. So I'm standing at the machine placing my breakfast sandwich order. He comes back with, beef jerky, sunflower seeds, a few energy bars, and some water. I asked if that's all he wanted, and he asked if he could get some cigarettes. I said, sure. We go to the register, and he's just calmly kind of glancing at me. I purchased his items and a pack of Newports. He then shook my hand and stood with his arms open, as if he wanted me to hug him, and I did. This man embraced me as if he were my brother, and he felt like peace. It felt natural, there was no fear. He was a little shorter than me. When he hugged me, he said, "Thank you," and then he added softly, "Everything will be okay." Then he walked out. I was standing there, in pure shock. I was sitting in an 80K car, just bringing this man anything he wanted from Sheetz, and he's telling me, "Everything will be okay." Wasn't I supposed to everything say that to him? Did I look like something was wrong with me? I was dumbfounded. My sandwich was ready a minute after he walked out. I walked outside and didn't see any sign of him in any direction I looked. I'm sure my words will never be able to sum up that experience as a whole, but it truly touched me. I'm pretty much an atheist and don't believe in religion. What this man or entity was, I don't know. Angel, time traveler, alien, I don't know. But I know I will never forget those eyes. My mom and cousin frequently claimed that a demon possessed our babysitter. She was a lovely young woman who was living with our family during the week and went home on weekends. Mom and cousin worked a lot outside the home, and we were 5 children to watch. For 2 years, everything was fine until the first strange night. The babysitter ran with all her power against the bedroom door and broke her nose. She couldn't remember anything about it. In the days that followed, she began to exhibit increasingly strange behavior for extended periods. During this period her eyes started to go red, and she would behave strangely, scream, change her voice, shout, and do creepy things. Every day she had more and more bruises on her body without hurting herself somewhere. Doctors couldn't find anything. It was getting worse until she threatened us kids, and my mom fired her and told her to move from our apartment. My mom and cousin were convinced that she was possessed by something, despite having previously not believed in such things. They didn't tell us when we were kids, but all of us still remember what happened. We were just too young to understand. They say at the end, when she left, she was an entirely different person. I still think about it sometimes. Was it a mental health issue that started suddenly? But she was at the doctor's, and every time everything was fine. I had a weird experience with two people a few years ago that were definitely NHI, non-human intelligences, of some kind. I was at a hospital then, recovering from a minor nose operation, where I got visited by my grandma, who is also an experiencer, and my BFF, who had brought her there. We were sitting in a lounge room to talk, and suddenly a couple walked by the door. They looked very plainly human, so I couldn't give a detailed physical description. I just know they seemed at least middle-aged or older and were both white Caucasians. She had her grayish hair tied back in a bun. The man might have been bald, but I'm not 100% certain because I didn't really focus on him. They both seemed so physically plain and uninteresting to me, actually, that I remember thinking they were the definition of mouse gray. So, as they were walking down the hallway, the women stopped and seemed to recognize me. The woman walked right up to me in the lounge room while her companion stood stoically in the doorway just outside. Then she said something like, "Oh, you're my name." And I was like, "Yes?" She then proceeded to tell a strange story about how I supposedly did not wake up from the anesthetic after my operation, and how the doctors had encouraged patients in the wake-up room to call my name in order to rouse me. She literally said, "We were all calling for you, you almost didn't wake up," or maybe it was "you almost didn't make it," but I reckon it was the former first, and she said both, actually. I'm sure that she couldn't have overheard my name because my group had been silent for a moment as they walked by. We had eaten and drank some tea. Also, there is no way a doctor would disturb other patients in a wake-up room and tell them my first name due to privacy laws alone, and I later confirmed I had woken up regularly and right on schedule with my real doctor. I didn't question the woman in that moment, though. Instead, I felt the underlying message that I had to be more mindful of the fragility of my life and putting myself in danger unnecessarily, which seemed really profound, like me living on matter to someone. In truth, I did not genuinely require this operation. However, I was experiencing significant depression and fatigue from work at the time, which led me to proceed with it primarily to obtain the sick leave. I still remember that I felt a bit dazed as I turned away from her to think about this some more and look out the window. In the meantime, the woman sat down at the table with my grandma and talked to her for a while before she left the room. I didn't really hear what they spoke about for some reason. Maybe I just didn't pay attention, although I was barely 1 or 2 meters away from them at the time. I'm pretty sure the woman just walked out after a while as if her job were done and didn't say anything else to me. Now, the funny thing is that my grandma remembers this weird incident to this day, but she doesn't remember what the woman said to her either. My BFF, who was sitting at the table, too, when it happened, opposite the woman, was staring at the table the entire time the couple was there as far as I recall, and he didn't speak. He doesn't remember a thing. Not only does he not remember the strange couple, but he also has no recollection of visiting me that day at the hospital, even though he definitely brought my grandma there, and we have a picture he took of me as proof. In retrospect, I think the man who had been standing at the door the entire time might have used some kind of mind control or telepathy on us all to manage the situation and basically switch off my BFF, but I can't be sure. That day remains one of the strangest in our lives. Those people were definitely not normal humans, but I'm grateful for this visit regardless. Their message/interest in my survival really touched me deeply and turned my life around. I haven't really felt depressed since that day, so I think they were my guides in a way, caring for me and my experienced family. Actually, yes. I was at my usual Wednesday night teens church group. I had gone to this church my entire life and went to the only high school in town with all of the people my age in the area. A new girl showed up, but many people seemed to know her, and she said she had been going to that Wednesday night group for a while, but I had never seen her in my life. I joined this church when I was 3 years old and had been there several days per week my entire life. I knew everyone by name and who they were related to, had watched my peers grow up alongside me, and had never seen this girl. She looked directly into my eyes the entire time she spoke, with the biggest grin that never left her face. I swear I have never seen anyone with eyes like hers. They were deep blue, with actual yellow sunflowers in the middle. She was the happiest person I had ever met, in a way that seemed impossible. She spoke to me like she loved me and was deeply interested in me and had almost nothing to say about herself. Kept asking questions to get more details about my life and seemed like my answers were astounding. I don't remember if she directly said it, but I got this deep feeling like she absolutely loved me and wanted the best for me in an uncomfortably deep way for a stranger. I never saw her again. I went to that group every week for several more months and never saw this girl again. Devil in disguise. This story comes down from my grandparents, who grew up in a small town in El Salvador. This is one among many encounters with the paranormal in their lives. Like many in El Salvador, my grandparents come from a town deeply religious and entrenched in the Catholic faith. Angels and demons are a real part of everyone's lives. My grandmother was 9 months pregnant with my uncle when her water finally broke. It was the middle of the night. Unfortunately for my grandparents, their house was on the other side of the town river, where lighting was poor and the roads were dirt. To get to the town center to catch a ride to the hospital, my grandparents needed to walk across a narrow, poorly lit bridge and up a large hill. An uneasy trek even when you're not getting ready to give birth. As my grandparents reach the river, they can hear the flow of the water and the cool breeze. My grandfather tells my grandmother to stay strong and focused. This is no time to be caught off guard. As they are about to walk across the bridge, my grandmother hears a cry. A little girl. Barefoot and sitting on a rock by the river. "Help me," she says. She can't be more than 5 years old. The little girl is looking right at my grandmother. "Help me, I have a splinter in my foot." My grandmother immediately feels a sense of motherly duty come over her as the little girl tends to her foot. My grandmother becomes very concerned for this little girl sitting on a rock in the middle of the night. She approaches the little girl who's got tears streaming down her face. As she reaches closer, my grandfather leaps in between them. He takes out his machete, and with a swift movement, he makes the sign of the Holy Cross in front of the little girl. To my grandmother's amazement, the girl disappears immediately. My grandfather turns to her and says, "You know better than this. You know the devil disguises itself as innocent and inviting as it can." My grandmother begins to sob and thank my grandfather as they continue their journey to the hospital. My mom owns a fish and chip shop. Above it is a flat where a Chinese family has been staying with an English woman looking about 25 to 30 years old. Behind the shop there are steps up to the flat. Whenever I'm there I see the English woman sat on the steps smoking and over time started having conversations with her, nothing special, just general chat. Well, a few months ago the Chinese family started saying that they saw the shadow of a woman standing looking out of their window. Then they began sleeping in the living room because they were too scared to sleep in the bedroom. They never told us why. More and more strange things started happening. Last week I was walking past the chip shop and saw the woman from the steps standing in the window, just looking down. I waved and smiled at her, and she smiled back. A member of the Chinese family saw me waving and asked me who I was waving at. I told him I was waving at Jessica. This is what she told me her name was when I spoke to her. He then told me the flat was empty, all the family was out at a restaurant, and no English girl called Jessica lived there. At first I thought he was joking because of how real she looked all the times I spoke to her. So he and I went round back to the steps, and I showed him where I always see her. He told me the cameras always pick up movement on these steps when nothing is there, and all of a sudden I just got the worst shivers. Looking back now, I realized that she seemed off. She had a soft voice and was very pale. And she was very vague in the things she'd say. It's been 6 days since I found out that I've basically befriended a ghost, and I've not seen her since. The weird thing is my mom has owned the shop for over 10 years, and there was never any talk of ghosts or spirits in that time until this latest family moved in. And since the time I waved at her in the window, the family hasn't had anything else happen to them. I usually saw her almost every other day, and the family had things happen almost daily, but now it's been almost a week and no sign. Met someone who didn't seem to be human. The encounter happened years ago when I worked at a Quick Trip as a teenager. It was an unremarkable day, and I had about an hour before my shift was over. I was running the register while my assistant manager went to attend to other tasks in the back with other coworkers. I was bored and on my phone behind the counter when I noticed a woman about my age, maybe a little older, walk up to my register. Immediately, like getting hit in the face, I noticed how beautiful she looked, but not in a horny or lustful type of way. Ethereal is probably the best word for it. She had brown hair that draped behind her back below her shoulders and was pretty fair complexion/pale. Dark brown pupils, and she was literally glowing. Not in the manner of a compliment where one might say someone appears attractive and radiant, but rather, she was genuinely emitting a soft white and golden hue. The best way to describe it is like a fuzz or haze around her whole body that extended out maybe 6 inches or so and tapered off. Anyway, she had this light smile that seemed very friendly and kind the whole time, and I was pretty shy and taken aback. I checked her items out, and she said, "Thank you," and walked out. She only spoke 3 words, "Hi" and "Thank you." No coworkers or customers were near me during this encounter, which was somewhat unusual since most of the time it's pretty busy. My then teen self thought it was love at first sight and always hoped she'd come back into the gas station someday, but she never did. Looking back on it, I don't think it was love at first sight, but rather I met someone from out of town, if you get what I mean. She definitely had a big presence that you could feel, but never any malice behind it. I don't know whether it was an alien, angel, guardian, spirit, or what, but she didn't feel human. Throughout my life, I've never had an experience like that, either before or after. It was just odd. It's kind of a boring and dumb story, but I just wanted to share because sometimes I randomly remember that encounter and how odd it was. I was visited by beings that appeared human when I was very young, but I don't believe they were actually human. I've been inspired to write and share something I experienced as a child, an encounter where I was visited by human-looking children. I've only ever shared this account with a few people I love and trust, so most of my extended family and friends have no idea that about my experiences. Please note that I'm not writing this to convince anyone, I'm just sharing what I experienced, exactly as it happened, and how it stayed with me after all these years and still has me wondering about it. So here it is. I was a little boy living in Ecuador when this happened, and I still remember it vividly to this day. And I'll admit, I've always had an exceptional memory, and many of my friends have pointed this out to me over the years, but even beyond memory, this event has stayed vividly in my heart and mind. It has just stayed with me all these years, and it comes up every now and then when something triggers the memory. We lived in a remote village in Ecuador, in a shack on stilts with no electricity and a deck in the back. Yeah. Think National Geographic type of living, with the Amazon River flowing directly behind our home. I remember one time my mom took me for a short walk just outside the village. She pointed out a bunch of alligators basking in the sun, and she made it very clear to me in that moment, don't ever go down to the river by myself. Or I'd become food for the alligators, caimans. One of my favorite things to do in that shack was to sit on the back deck and stare at the river. I found it magnificent and just mesmerizing. I'd just stand there transfixed at the flowing water for what seemed like hours. Well, one day, while I was out there looking at the river, I turned around. And I was caught by surprise to find 6 children standing directly behind me. They just showed up there. But how? The deck directly looks over the water, and there's no other way to get to the deck except from inside the shack. But there they were, standing and staring at me. They were pale white. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. 3 boys and 3 girls. And they weren't wearing any clothing. Thinking on this detail may seem strange, but it's part of what made the moment so vivid, unforgettable, and surreal. And this is a detail that still makes me chuckle a bit because I don't know why, but seeing them standing there like that made me want to be like them, so I took off my clothes too and joined them. Here's the thing, right, remember this was a remote village in Ecuador. There was no street, no houses per se, just shacks perched on both sides of a dirt road. In all my walks through the village, I never recalled ever seeing blonde children living there. None. They began playing with me, and we started playing a game of running around in a counterclockwise circle, and I could physically touch them. As we ran, I had my hands on the shoulders of the child in front of me, and the one behind me had their hands on mine. My God. I was having so much fun with my new golden playmates. All I felt was joy, happiness, and this sense of connection with them. But what's interesting is they never said a word to me. They never communicated with me in any way. We just played like children. Then they abruptly stopped. So, I stopped too. They all seemed to stare to our right. I followed their gaze. And then something phenomenal happened. I saw a black slit appear in front of us as if drawn with an invisible marker, and then it widened into an oval. But inside the oval wasn't black. It looked brownish. Then the children started stepping through it one by one. I was at the end, and I have to share that, I was fully intent on stepping through the opening in front of us right after the child in front of me. But no dice. The moment the last child stepped through, just as I moved forward to enter, the portal sealed itself closed. I was so confused. I remember missing my friends immediately. I remember yearning for them to come back. I started running around in a circle by myself for minutes, hoping it would somehow entice them to reappear. They never did. Eventually, I picked up my clothes and wandered back into the house, where my mom repeatedly quizzed me about why I had taken them off. I did not have the vocabulary to offer her any credible explanation. Years later, living in the Bronx, my dad bought us a 1971 World Book Encyclopedia set. I loved that set. It was my analog version of the internet back then. So much to explore. I'd sit on the sofa each day just scrolling through volume after volume of each book. When I finally reached the letter S volume and the section on sculptors, I came across a photo that completely captivated me, a sculptor's work of cherubs, unclothed, that immediately brought to mind the children who had come and played with me that day. Years later, I concluded that angelic cherubs may have visited me. But many years later, I read a book by Ricardo González Corpancho, a Peruvian journalist/author now residing in Argentina, titled Contact with Planet Apu. He writes about multiple experiences meeting what he describes as Nordic beings. It's a splendid and insightful book. Corpancho's book impacted my perception of who I believe may have visited me on the deck that sunny day in Ecuador. Perhaps I was not visited by cherubs as I had previously thought, but Nordic ET children? Seems a bit more credible to me after reading about Corpancho's accounts of his meeting with the Apu face to face. Were the children? I met Apu as well. I wonder. I simply wonder. My most terrifying experience is an evening in my house when I was getting ready to walk up the stairs to my bedroom. Along the wall was the shadow of a non-human-like figure with horns. I kept getting images of a ram in my head that kind of resembled Krampus. My cat was walking with me up the stairs, and she got wide-eyed and sat frozen watching its direction. I could sense it followed me to my room and that it was walking around in my room because my cat was running around, hiding under various things, like she was being followed. That's the part that scared me. I had eventually created my spiritual protection ring, and after that the ram seemed to have left. I was very thankful that all it seemed to be doing was passing through, and nothing more happened beyond just walking around. I figured out the source of its attachment was tarot cards that I had recently purchased at the time. This seemed to also be the connection to why I kept seeing this ram in my sleep since I had brought home the tarot cards. My sister passed away years ago, and a week after her death a mimic demon attached itself to me. When I was 4 years old, my sister, who was 7 at the time, died. It was a sudden death. A bike hit her when she was with her friend, was announced brain dead, and then a few hours later was taken off of life support. My family has a lot of stories about the paranormal, and honestly, I enjoy hearing about it. The night my sister died, my mum was driving past the crash but didn't know. I'm not sure what lights they were, but there are 2 lights on a car that can't go out by themselves, like, if they were to turn off, both had to be off. It's impossible for only one to go off on its own. But my mom drove past, and one of those lights went out, and then my sister's favorite song came on the radio at the same time. Anyway, my dead sister and I shared a bedroom, but I obviously got lonely since I was alone in the room. My other older sister decided to come in the room with her best friend at the time and hang out with me. We basically heard something under our dead sister's bed, and when I looked under it, I saw a little girl. She had no face, only empty voids for eyes. She wore a white hospital gown and had medium-length dark brown hair and a bloody wound on the right side of her head, which was the left side from my perspective. I honestly forgot about it until I turned 11 or 12. I was sitting in my room, we had moved houses a few times since then, and I looked at the end of my bed, where that thing was peeking out at me. I started drawing it afterwards, and when I showed my other older sister, she was genuinely terrified. My sister is 24, so she remembers our sister a lot better and said it looks exactly like our sister. The weird thing is, I wasn't allowed at the funeral and never saw my sister's body after she died. Turns out she had a head wound, which the demonic attachment had. I believe it disguised itself to look like my sister, but after I started calling it out for what it really was, it stopped pretending. I didn't see it for a while. My younger sister, who never met our dead sisters, started seeing it as well. And just as I thought it was gone, I saw it in my mom's car. A black figure with creepy ducking eyes, but I knew it was the attachment. I get a horrible feeling of dread when it's near, and I am terrified. I've never really been scared of it before that, but something about it just looked drop dead scary. Duck knows if my house is haunted too, but whenever I'm home alone, I ducking hate going near my mom's and little sister's rooms. Like, there's just a horrible feeling I get. Maybe that's because a few times I've looked in my sister's room and seen something similar to what I saw in the car, and my mom tells me she hears a child running around her room and sitting on her bed at night. What do I do? Any advice? I want it gone, but I also want my sister to finally find peace. She's probably working overtime at present. When I was living in Newcastle, Australia, in 2020, I was a gym fanatic and would hit the gym every morning at 4 a.m. I had just started reading about tall whites and non-human intelligence, NHI, as well as the various races associated with them. When I arrived at the gym, a tall pale white-haired blue-eyed man would be leaving. For about a month I saw him every day, and I told my partner. She had recently decided to do early morning workouts and asked who was there, and I told her about this guy. Now he was odd looking, with sharp features, 6 feet tall, and always wore singlets and shorts. This was odd, as it was winter, and he didn't feel right. I assumed maybe he was autistic or had some kind of mental illness. He also had a small portly lady with him, who looked to be his driver/carer. She did not work out. I told my partner about my suspicions in a joking manner as we both listened to podcasts about tall whites. The first time my partner came with me, I was thinking to myself as I walked past him, it's a ducking alien, a ducking tall white, and this bloke, for the first time in a month, looked me dead in the eyes and smiled. This was odd. I am friendly and would nod whenever I saw him or his minder, but they never acknowledged me until that day. Then I never saw him again. Real odd. Not my first encounter, but my first as an adult. It was disguised as my mother. A terrifying thing happened to me one late night during Christmas break when I was in middle school, roughly 5 to 6 years ago. I was asleep in my bed, but I began to wake up because I heard the sound of slippers dragging on the floor, and they sounded very close to me. My mom was the only person I knew who wore slippers at home and stayed up late to check on me. When I opened my eyes, I saw standing at the end of my bed something that looked like my mom, her usual light blue robe, with her shirt peeking through, and her medium-length hair that always surrounded her face and gently fell a little past her shoulders. However, I could not make out her face. Hers was like a shadow. No features, just all black. Being still a little half asleep, though, I thought that it was just because my whole room was so dark that I couldn't make out her face. When I blinked, I heard the sound of slippers dragging on the ground move even closer to me, and when I opened my eyes back up, it was now standing right next to me by my bed. My eyes focused on my mom's shadowed over face, and I saw a dark shadowy hand start to go towards my neck. Confused and still sleepy, I focused on my mom's robe and the little tie that kept hers closed. Like I usually did to my mom, I went to tug on it. I said, "What are you doing, Mom?" After reaching my hand out, that was when I realized it was not my mom. My hand missed the tie and went right through the torso, and it felt so cold and gave me such a sick, nasty feeling. I looked up with my eyes wide open and just stared blankly at the figure in front of me. Finally realizing it wasn't my mom and that it was grabbing my neck, I screamed something at it and jumped out of my bed, running into the hallway. Then, it just disappeared. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but when I touched it, it felt so dark and gross. I'm not sure if it was trying to hurt/end me, but that isn't the first time something has tried to hurt or end me. That was just the beginning of it all. Personally, I think it was disguised as my mother to try and get me to trust it while also taking advantage of the fact that I was half asleep. Also, there are many reasons as to why this wasn't sleep paralysis, as I tried making myself believe it was that until I faced the facts. What I mean is that since I was able to move and speak, that rules out the possibility of it being sleep paralysis. Since you can't move or speak during that. Any advice or opinions, as always, are welcome. I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have to say about matters such as this. Have any of you had similar experiences? Such as something disguising itself as a family member? Non-human entity experience. My so and I live together and have separate bedrooms but more frequently sleep in her room together, as she has a more comfortable bed. I have chronic back pain, so some nights I choose to sleep alone so I can sprawl out and not be constricted. Lately have been sleeping apart, as pain has been bad. Last Wednesday, though, I started my day and went to work but had the overwhelming desire to make sure I slept in her room with her that night. My day went on as normal, and when it came time to go to sleep, I hopped into bed with her, and the lights were off. Now to my reason for sharing. About an hour after falling asleep I woke up unexpectedly. As a normally heavy sleeper, I could sense that something was wrong. After lying still for a moment to make sure I heard the breathing, I turned over to face the door, and I saw it. Level with the top of the lamp beside me was a black figure, oddly shaped and waving in the air like the ocean. My first reaction was to think that an intruder had entered my house, and as I screamed an obscenity and woke my I quickly turned over to shield her in case this figure attacked us. Moments later, after getting no reaction from the intruder, I flipped over, turned on the lamp, and came face to face with the waving figure floating above our bed. It obstructed my whole view upwards, but I could see the wall in front of me, so I knew that it was only above us. It was a floating blanket of fear, darker than any darkness shades and closed doors could create. All I could do was stare as it fell closer into my vision. I panicked and turned on the light to find an empty room and a visibly upset girlfriend. Laying silently, my heart pounding, my head in pure fight mode, I had no explanation for what I just saw. "Did you see that?" I asked her. "Yes," she said. After discussing and coming to the conclusion that it was better we believed it was our minds playing tricks on us, I got her to go back to sleep, and I stayed awake, trying to get the image out of my mind. After some time I convinced myself to try to sleep and shut all the lights off again. My heart pounding, my face in my pillow, all I could tell myself was to not open my eyes. At all costs, don't open your eyes. I turned to face her, trying to get some comfort to ease my mind, and once that became too uncomfortable, I reasoned with myself that it was time to lie on my back. Opening my eyes to adjust my pillow, I found myself face to face with what I feared I would see. Inches from my face was a floating mass, now blocking out almost my whole view, waving like the ocean. Falling towards me and then away again, I could only stare at this object, my brain searching for an answer to what it could be. Thoughts raced through my head, but all I could hear was telling me that it was a female. I never felt threatened, but my mind knew that it was non-human. The more I stared, the farther my heart sank into my chest, and like a hand on a hot stove, my head caught up to my body, and I crashed back into the bed, covering my face and sinking my eyes into the pillow. As I fell, a pressure on the sheets above me pushed my feet into the mattress and held my ankles down. I could feel this object pulling at my sheets and resisting my legs when I moved them. After about a minute, everything stopped, and I could move freely. I clung to my sew and took one look out into the room and saw nothing. Whatever it was gone. The next morning after leaving for work and knowing my sew was awake, she asked me to describe what I saw, and our descriptions matched exactly. Whatever visited us that night had no intention of hurting us but was able to physically manipulate the present and convey feelings without speaking. I know that whatever it was female, it just kept ringing in my head that this thing was female. Despite the few times I have encountered unexplainable phenomena, I have never seen an entity with my own eyes. I can't shake the image of it from my mind, and I haven't been able to sleep soundly since then. I find myself checking over my shoulder every time I get close to falling asleep, and only a few drinks and being exhausted have gotten me through a night. If you have had similar experiences, do share. I've been wrecking my mind trying to put it to rest. Some evil thing was disguised like my dad. Today my brother was sitting in my dad's room, and my dad was cooking in the kitchen. Just for y'all to understand, my room is right next to my dad's room, there's only a wall between us. So as my dad was cooking, I was just chilling in my room, sitting in my bed. While sitting on my bed, I can see who gets in my dad's room, like, if he gets out or in, I can see him and see the door. So I heard my dad finish cooking and go in his room, and I swear to God, I saw him. I literally saw him with my bare eyes, and the biggest proof that I saw him is that I was already waiting for him to finish in the kitchen and get in the room so I could go and make myself some food, since literally in the same second he got in the room, I got up and went straight to the kitchen. Literally 1 minute passed while I was in the kitchen, and I heard my dad's cough outside in my brother's room, and I went crazy. Like, how the hell? So I literally ran outside to ask him if he got in his room and how he went that fast, because if he went from his room to my brother's room, he would have to pass in front of the kitchen, and I would have seen or at least heard him. My dad is a big person. I would, of course, notice him passing. He literally said that he didn't go to the room and didn't see me in the kitchen, so I thought he was joking, but I went and asked my brother, and he said the same thing. When I saw that figure, I kind of felt like that's not how my dad acts, but I swear it was wearing the same thing, and I literally saw him. Yes. I was at the store with my daughter. A lady was standing at the end of the aisle with her right hand, palm up, and her left hand, palm down, reaching out to me and looking into my eyes. I cannot describe the feeling I had come over me. I don't know what drew me to her, but I walked right up to her and said hello and asked if I knew her. She seemed so familiar. I thought she was one of my mom's good friends. I asked if her name was this friend. It wasn't. She said her name, and it was my grandma's first name and my mom's first name. Like Ruth Rebecca. Something that sounded backwards. She looked at my daughter and said she was a good child and hoped she'd grow up to be like her mom, me. Then she turned to me and said, God loves you. He knows you're doing your best, and he loves you. He knows your family. He knows your brothers and sisters and your mom and dad. He loves them dearly. And he especially loves you. I busted out bawling. I was struggling so damn bad at that point in my life. I was also an atheist, wanting to find the God I've heard others talk about. She asked if she could hug me. I accepted. It was the warmest, most beautiful, and most comforting feeling I've ever felt. I was overwhelmed. At the same time I felt her face against mine. It was prickly and cool. It didn't feel like human skin. We pulled apart, and she looked me in the eyes, and the tears were just falling down my face. I didn't know what I was experiencing, but I knew exactly what it was at the same time. Her face was human but not. Her eyebrows weren't filled in. Her eyes were light grayish blue. She hugged me again, and I realized she wasn't talking to me at that moment, but I heard her talking. She wasn't moving her mouth, but I heard her like she was. She said goodbye and, remember that I'm loved, and told my daughter she is loved and that I, her mom, love her so much and to listen to me. She walked away and turned the corner. My daughter, 12, followed her around the corner and said she wasn't there. I looked and she wasn't. I was crying the happiest tears. At the checkout, the cashier asked if I was okay, and I told her, yes. I just had an incredible experience with a woman. It's hard to explain. I happily ugly cried all the way home while packing in groceries and again sharing my experience with my husband. Eyes welled up with tears. This happened a couple days after I had a frightening dream about a scary creature named Sikla pinned me down on my back. I elbowed him in the face and took off running and woke up. I feel like she was protecting me from this thing and the rabbit holes I started going down trying to figure out what it was. I had one that was odd. I was on the porch smoking a cig, and this guy was walking down the sidewalk. I say guy because he didn't move like a kid, if that makes any sense. He was kind of walking hesitantly, and his movements were jerky. He was tiny. I'm 5 feet 6 inches, and I was close to a foot taller, but he was normally proportioned, not dwarf-like. I'm watching and have walked down the sidewalk and stopped at my walkway. Instantly I started getting this weird feeling. I was scared and I couldn't tell why. He walks up my walkway and stops at the edge of the stairs and is just looking around like he is out of it. He kept saying, 23? I was trying to tell him that wasn't my address. He walked up the stairs and put his hand on my doorknob and kept repeating, 23? I pointed down the street and told him 23 would be like 5 blocks down. He started walking away but paused at the bottom of the stairs and kept repeating 23. If that wasn't bizarre enough, when he had been close to me, I tried to get a good look at his face. It was like the light had changed. Like clouds had covered the sun or something. But I couldn't make out his face. Suddenly it was like a shadow was where his face should have been. He walked off with his jerky motions, and I immediately went inside and locked the deadbolt. Super ducking weird. So, about 24-ish years ago, I saw a shadow figure while fishing with 4 other friends. We all saw it. This was at a spillway off Roxana New Burlington Road near Spring Valley, Ohio. The spillway is like a miniature dam in the middle of nowhere. There is a sidewalk on each side, and the dam is maybe 15 feet wide. You could walk up the stairs on our side and cross to the other side, where we saw the ghost. What happened was that this shadow figure just appeared on the stairs on the other side. I saw the shadow figure suddenly appear and start walking down the sidewalk. About the point it got to the bottom of the stairs, my friend Danny yelled at me and said, "Jeremy, what are you doing over there?" It was very dark out with just a little moonlight for vision. I looked at Danny and said, "I'm right here." I was literally like 3 feet in front of him on the sidewalk watching this thing. My other 4 friends, at this point, realized someone was on the other side of the dam, walking along the sidewalk. But I already knew some crazy shit was going down, because it wasn't walking, it was gliding down the sidewalk. This thing was about 7 feet tall and darker than night. It looked like it was wearing a cloak and was hooded. Aside from that, it was difficult to discern any distinct features of the figure. The best way to describe this thing is like the alien from the movie The Predator. The Predator stays camouflaged with a clear camo in the jungle. This shadow figure had camo just like that, except it was blacker than night, and you couldn't see through it. Now, back to the gliding. It kept gliding down the path, maybe 20 feet. At this point the sidewalk and fence stopped and became grass and a small embankment. This figure proceeded to the embankment, sat down, and stared straight at us from about 20 feet away. This spot is where I saw the eyes. This shadow figure had 2 glowing orangish red eyes that pulsated. This thing just stared us down. My friends were yelling at it and asking questions. "Hey, who are you? Where did you come from?" I still don't think they realized what was going on until it didn't answer and they started throwing rocks at it. The thing never moved a millimeter. Just sat there frozen with its eyes staring at us, pulsating. This place is in the middle of nowhere. There were no cars in the parking lot when we arrived. It was well after dark, and this place was closed. We packed our shit in about 10 seconds and walked as quickly as possible back to the lot. My friend Josh and I walked backwards to make sure it didn't follow us. The parking lot was still empty. I never went back to that place again. I began researching the topic about 7 years later. This was the first time I ever heard of shadow people. I also learned that the area of this spillway used to be a town in the 1800s. Basically a ghost town now. My story seems somewhat unique, because all the other shadow people sightings seem to be people alone and inside. My encounter was outside, and 5 people in total saw this thing. I think it was a camouflaged being, not known by science. Like maybe the garb it was wearing was some sort of alien camouflage. I can't know for certain, though, because all I could see was the dark predator camo in its eyes. I've met two, actually. Both were human, just carrying something inside them that made me never want to meet anyone like them again. Evil does exist, in forms both from and not from this world. The first one was when I was roughly 10 to 12 or a little older. I was raised as a Southern fundamentalist Christian in a small town, and although I no longer identify with that faith, I attended a small church there with a group of school friends. Anyways, one day this guy just shows up for a service. No clue where he came from, just went by what we'll say was or none of the old folks really seemed bothered by him. He was probably mid-30s and clean, well-dressed, and single. That was what set me off. The first time I saw him and heard him speak, he was what I could only describe as so perfect it seemed fake. I've had other intuitive events in my life, and I don't have any mental disorders, so I'm not one to ignore unusual thoughts and feelings. And the feeling that kept ringing in my head was, everything about this man is a carefully crafted balancing act. His smile was too wide, too perfect. His hair was never out of place, never a wrinkle in his clothing. I kept quiet, for fear of having just read him wrong, but I refused to go near him for the rest of the time we both attended the church. Here's where it gets spooky. One of the school friends, who we'll call M, and her sister, J, attended the church alongside me. J somehow became involved with this man, despite a 5+ year age gap. They were engaged for a short period and then broke it off, and are disappeared for good. M proceeded a year later to tell me why. According to her, one night, J and R were alone inside the church working together to clean out an old room they were getting ready to repurpose. J had her back to R, who got uncomfortably quiet, and when J turned to him to see what happened, she claimed his eyes turned completely black and he lunged at her from across the room and attempted to choke her with his bare hands. He left the area soon after. Now, I never witnessed anything, and this was not an area where it would have been safe for J to come out about having any kind of mental illness, nor would it have been fruitful for her to speak up if he had assaulted her, so it's totally possible she made the story up as a cover-up in order to convince the congregation he was bad in the only way she knew how. I'll never know. I am certain that there was something amiss with him, and I subconsciously recognized it before anyone else did. The other one was one of my mom's partners when I was roughly 17 to 19. My upbringing was traumatic for a lot of reasons I won't go into, but my mom raised me by herself, and unfortunately that equaled exposure to the awful men she brought home to live with us. The worst one, by far, was T1 5-minute conversation with him left you drained. His aura took up the entire room you were in and left no breathing space. He stole things because it was funny. He called me stupid to my face. He would show up to our home when I was there alone and refused to leave. He once told my mother that he never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. But this wasn't enough to scare her. He was manipulative, and my mom was enamored enough to look past it all. The final straw was when she broke up with him at a restaurant, and his response was to openly sob at the table and proceed to throw food from his plate at her. She never saw him again, but for the next 2 years, her phone would occasionally ring with his number, and she once rushed me from watching TV to lock our doors because she suddenly got the feeling someone was outside, in the dark. His presence made me feel like a caged/cornered animal, and I will run for my life if I ever encounter someone again who shows the behavior he did. Back in February, within a week of returning from a weekend visiting my friend in Seattle, I had 2 such experiences that were quite unsettling. The first incident occurred while I was in the car with my partner. At the stoplight near our home, we observed a woman driving a car that was turning in our direction, and something about her appearance seemed unusual. What caught my attention was her unnaturally flawless skin, like an uber lifelike android. Not to jump down that conspiracy hole, but despite it not being my flavor, it was certainly my first thought in the moment. After watching her make the turn, I make mine as my partner looks over at me and asks if I saw that. I ask what he means, and he says the woman driving that car didn't look real, or is it just me? Her movement seemed unnatural, but I suppose it didn't strike me as hard because movement disorders suck. It was weird and a bit unnerving so close to home, but we've made plenty of jokes about "aw man, those government androids are almost passable now, ha ha ha." So the one that rattled me really ducking hard. We were at Walmart, the cultural epicenter of small towns across the southern US, my partner and I decided to divide and conquer. I was browsing the chips, if I recall correctly, and there was only one other person in the aisle at the far end. I notice a guy entering the aisle from the far end, and I mentally LOL because, no offense, but he looks Mormon AF, blue polo with white border stripes, khakis, pale skin, and dark hair. It looks like maybe he just got out of church or something, nothing unusual. I was more amused at the moment because I had my collar and stuff on and wondered if he'd react poorly to my appearance, as is common in the Bible Belt. He was humming to himself as he slowly browsed, but as he walked/browsed past me, every internal alarm in me started screaming to get away from it. I don't know what I felt, but it was dark, terrifying, and definitely not human. In those seconds I had also noticed that same eerily flawless skin as the woman earlier that week, but the movements were normal. It gets better, though. As soon as he went around the corner of the aisle, I followed, looked, and he was gone, so I sprinted the other way like a maniac, making it to the other end just in time to see him leave the store without having purchased anything. He browsed extra hard and slowly passed me before immediately leaving the store. The android jokes got a lot less funny after that. That time my friends and I pissed off a non-human entity. I will start this off by saying that I have had a few encounters with several different non-human entities, and this particular story is the most recent and, honestly, the most intense experience with the paranormal I have ever had. My friends Ray and Cameron, my boyfriend Ash, and I were hanging out together one evening early last June. We'd been at Ray's house for a really long time and were kind of bored, so we decided to drive to this little trail just down the road from his house and walk down to a clearing near its mouth for a picnic and smoke session. That is where we met him for the first time. The trail wound down from a two-lane street that backed up along a housing development and ended in the local cemetery about 2 miles away. The first 300 feet of it were lined on either side by a hodgepodge mix of eucalyptus trees, pepper trees, scrub brush, and palms. After that stretch, the left side opened up into a small grassy hill with several large granite boulders scattered over it, and to the right the stand of trees continued down into the bank of a stream we could not see. This stream was full of frogs, whose loud croaking was the background music to our picnic. They croaked almost constantly the whole night we were there, only stopping for 30 seconds at a time max before starting up again slowly, one frog at a time. About 500 feet ahead of the grassy hill, the path curved off to the left. This turn was overhung by the branches of a massive pepper tree, which shaded the path considerably. It was about 9 p.m. when we had finally set up our stuff in the clearing, and our first 2 hours there were really fun. We listened to music and the frogs, had some snacks, smoked some weed, and were generally having a good time. The moon was full that night, and the path faced east, so the area was fairly well lit even once the sun had gone down, and the general vibe was pleasant. We were pretty well absorbed in one another and generally having a good time when suddenly I noticed that it was really quiet. I drifted away from the conversation and began paying attention to the clearing around us again. The frogs had entirely stopped croaking. At first, I just waited for them to start again, but when they didn't, I got a little nervous. I got up from our blanket and walked over to the stand of trees on the right side of the path and listened to see if I could hear some sort of animal moving around down by the creek. When I heard nothing, I turned to look down to where the trail bent. As I watched it, the whole area got darker. The shadow advanced from around the bend and stretched over the path. It was dark enough that I could no longer see the moonlight in the trees. My initial thought was that a cloud had passed over the moon, but when I looked up at it, the sky was entirely clear. Now I was confused and a little freaked out, and the frogs were still silent. It had been about 5 to 7 minutes at this point, and they had never been quiet that long. I scanned the area again, still searching for something that would have made them stop croaking, and that's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, shuffling, two-legged footsteps coming down the path towards us. Ash and I made eye contact, and I knew he had heard it too. I turned to look at the rest of the group and said, "We should go." All three of them immediately sprung to action, and they began packing up. The whole time I was keeping an eye out for whatever was moving around as I packed. I heard a few more footsteps and some crunching brush, but whatever it was never seemed to approach, and the frogs still hadn't started croaking again. We made our way quickly up the trail again, needing flashlights where we had not needed any before, as quickly as we could. As soon as we broke out of the trees and hit the head of the trail, the frogs started croaking full force again. They didn't trail in slowly as they had before, instead coming in at full volume again all at once and making us jump out of our skins. We went home that night and expected it to be the end. It wasn't. About 2 weeks later I found myself lying in my bed unable to sleep, so I thought I would go downstairs to the garage, drink some water, smoke some weed, and watch Game Grumps and then try to go to bed again afterwards. After an hour or so of being down there I decided I was tired enough to try to sleep again, so I gathered all my stuff up and went back into my house. About halfway down the hallway that connected our garage to our kitchen, I heard something moving around in the backyard. I walked over to one of the windows in the kitchen to look back there, and I didn't see anything, so I locked the door and walked over to turn off the kitchen lights. Right as I shut them off, something fell off of our dining room table on the other side of the room. This freaked me out, so I hightailed it upstairs and went into my bedroom, closing and locking the door behind me. I took a few minutes to decompress, assured myself that I was being silly and that I had just freaked myself out, and then shut out my bedroom lights and went to bed. I had been lying in bed for about 5 minutes when I heard a low growl come from the corner of my bedroom near my door to my balcony and my closet. I immediately opened my eyes and looked over to it, and as I was staring, the corner of the shadows started to lengthen, and the whole area got darker. The darkness spread across that side of the room, from the closet corner to the one by my bedroom door, and as I followed its path with my eyes, I saw him. He blurred out of the darkness, just a silhouette of dark red, then green, then black, and then I could actually see him. He had the body of a black bear, large and dark but with skin loose and fur rumpled. The body looked like it was dead and had been for a while but was not quite rotting yet. His head was a deer skull, bleached white from the sun and looking straight at me. The feeling that filled the room when I saw him was awful. Predatory, angry, hungry, and ready to do whatever harm he could. As soon as I saw him, I shut my eyes and pulled my blanket up to my chin. I began to tell him out loud that he was not welcome and he needed to leave. As I spoke, he began growling louder and louder until suddenly he stopped. Then I heard him walk down the stairs, and he was gone. I knew that it was the thing we had met in the clearing. I slept with the lights on that night and told my friends what had happened. Ray agreed to come over the next day to help me cleanse the house and make him duck off. So Ray comes over the next day, and we salt and sage every door and window and draw protection sigils on every door in blessed oil. We can hear him stomping around the house in broad daylight as we are doing this. He is pacing around upstairs, hitting the walls, running claws over the garage door, and, at one point, he even slams his fist into it from up on the balcony above. He was being so loud that when my mom got home, she thought we were doing some sort of project in the garage and came out to ask us about the noises. He continued throwing a fit for about 2 hours until we decided to give him a peace offering of nuts, fruit, meat, and honey, which we buried off my property on the hill behind my house while making it very clear that we were sorry for bothering him but that he couldn't stay. He stopped bothering me entirely after that. He tried to bug Ash and Ray for about 2 weeks by waking them up with a nightmare about him and then banging on the walls of their houses. We ended up having to seal their places too, and Ray made us all charms to keep him the hell away. He hasn't tried to interact with any of us since. I have no clue what he is. We did a bunch of research and nothing seemed right. I also got the sense that the form he showed me was purely meant to scare me. I have no clue if it reflects his true nature. At the moment I am calling him a land spirit. If any of you have any ideas of what he could be, please share them. I was renting a house in Arizona about 10 years ago when I encountered a problem with the sprinkler system. My wife and I went to talk to the person at the management company about it. Guy had dark hair and dark eyes. He sat in his chair and behind his desk and listened to me describe the issue but never said a single word. He did not say hello or goodbye, nor did he ask any questions for clarification about the issue. Just had this lifeless look on his face and stared at us. We finally left. Wife thought the guy was an alien or something. Really weird. Someone later came out and fixed the sprinkler issue. Fast forward to about 2 years ago. We are living in North Carolina. COVID is in effect, but no masks are required. I am shopping alone at Home Depot, and I swear the same guy from the rental company in Arizona is driving one of those big floor scrubbers through the aisles. I stop walking to let him drive by, and he stares me down as he slowly passes me, same lifeless look on his face, same hair, same dark eyes. I feel deep down like it was the same person. Freaked me out. I went to visit a friend who's a single mom living in a small house with her older teenage son. She had asked the son to stay with a friend because the only private room in the house was his. She slept on a futon in the living room. She was going to give me the private room. I was only going to be there for 2 nights. The room had 2 queen-sized beds in it, I guess so he could have his friends over. We hung out, had dinner, and eventually headed off to bed. I closed the door and went to sleep in one of the beds. I never sleep well in new places, so I was kind of sleeping fitfully when I heard what sounded like someone breathing in the other bed. I just assumed the kid had come home unexpectedly and had crashed in the other bed. Maybe they didn't want to wake me to move me out or something. I've gone to lots of co-ed parties and festivals, so I didn't give it much thought. I wasn't worried about a teenage boy who was completely asleep in the other bed of his mother's house. I must have been more bothered than I knew, because I even had a harder time sleeping after that. And when I would sleep, I'd have these dreams where there was a young blonde boy in the other bed looking at me. Her son is dark. I chalked it up to anxiety and just tried to get back to sleep. But at one point, I was asleep, and I had this extremely strong sense that a malevolent being had thrown itself across the room from that other bed to mine and was towering over me, almost touching me. I could feel it right near me, and it felt like it absolutely hated me. I didn't dare open my eyes. I was terrified. Eventually I got brave enough to open my eyes, and it wasn't there. I could still hear the breathing, and I was so scared I didn't let myself sleep for the rest of the night. I was also terrified to look over at the other bed. In the morning, there was nobody in that other bed, and it hadn't been slept in. My logical brain says it was sleep paralysis and anxiety, and that the breathing was from my friend in the other room. When we talked about it the next day, she said maybe the dog got into the room or something, but the door was latched. Even writing about it now gives me chills. I'm usually pretty rational, and I know it was probably just a bad dream and sleep paralysis, but I don't think I could ever spend another night in that room. Sometimes I contemplate inquiring with my friend whether she or her son has ever experienced any malevolent sensations in the house, but I hesitate to do so as I do not wish to alarm her. A demonic entity was pretending to be a deceased relative. This happened a little before 2:24 a.m. on July 21st. It was a very similar situation to last time, but I know I couldn't have been asleep because I had just looked at my phone to check the time. I was also wide awake and not tired at all. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep, but I couldn't. I heard mumbling and whispering that I couldn't quite make out, and I knew what was about to happen, as I've experienced things like this before. They eventually became clear enough for me to understand. Their voices were soft and kind, but this time I could recognize them as demonic entities. When I listened to them, I could hear two separate entities, but one I'd never heard before, and I instantly recognized it somehow. I don't know how, even though I've never heard his voice before, I knew it was my younger brother who passed away. His voice was muffled and then grew louder until I could hear him screaming, saying horrible things to me. He told me how it's my fault he's dead, how he was supposed to be the next Jesus and I ruined that for him because I'm demonic and evil. The other two entities were also shouting, but I couldn't understand what they were saying because I was focusing on my brother's voice. This continued for about 10 minutes until it suddenly stopped. I couldn't do anything to stop it or block it out, I just had to wait until it was over. I'm used to being visited by demonic entities, it still scares me, and I don't like it, but I'm not as surprised by their visits as I was before. Usually they will only scream at me and then leave me alone once I have suffered enough, but they've never done anything like this, and I feel like I'm in shock. I'm terrified and feel overwhelmed with guilt. I already felt guilty after he passed, but hearing it from him is a completely different experience. I think they pretended to be my brother to hurt me more, my usual pain isn't enough for them. I worked briefly at an R1 research university and seldom interacted directly with the principal investigator. When I did, it was usually during lab meetings, and he spoke casually about his early work in artificial intelligence in the 1990s, sometimes drifting into oblique references to government projects, never elaborating, never quite inviting questions. He was a genuine polymath, but what lingered wasn't his intellect so much as his manner. He was unfailingly pleasant and so consistently at ease that it felt practiced. His expressions were measured and precise, as if every reaction had been calibrated. Being around him gave me the uneasy sense that my own responses were being anticipated, even guided, before even I was aware of them. The only time I ever spoke with him alone was near the end of my time in his group. I'd been openly criticizing the conclusions their data was pointing toward, so I expected a reprimand. When I arrived, he was seated behind his desk. I started, out of habit, by asking about his book collection. He immediately deflected the conversation and asked me on the spot to design a device for blind people within a specific scenario and sketch it on the whiteboard. It wasn't entirely outside our work, but it wasn't tied to anything I was assigned. I came up with something quickly, and it was frankly an awful design. He didn't say whether it was right or wrong. He just said, "Okay," and stared at me. We stood there in silence. Then his pupils blinked. It was very similar to how the guy's pupils blink in the first MIB movie with Will Smith, but not as obvious or dramatic, just the pupils blinked, not the irises. Subtle enough that I questioned myself even as it happened. Still, it left me shaken. I tried telling someone later. They laughed it off as the most ridiculous bullshit thing they'd ever heard. I am telling you, I know what I believe I saw in that moment. This man's pupils blinked at me vertically, like if a cat could blink its pupils. I wasn't asked back the next semester, and after that, I didn't see him again except once, walking in the same area of campus. We saw each other, but he acted stone-faced as if he hadn't even seen me. I have never told anyone outside my immediate family involved in the incident. I was at home with my longtime girlfriend and daughter. We lived on the second story of an apartment building while we were waiting to move into our house. They were in the living room in the middle of the building, and I was in our bedroom in the back of the building with a fire escape. I was on my phone and laptop working. It was more like dozing around at this time of night, But you get the idea. I went to get up to tell the girls it's getting late. As I stood up, I noticed a face in the window. Initially, I seemed to disregard it, and I cannot quite explain why I did so. It's like I thought, that's not really there, or I figured it had to be pareidolia. Either way, I remember making the decision to act as though it was not real even though I just saw it. As I was rounding the bed, it turned towards me and looked right at me. At this point I could make out a face, neck, and shoulders. And I froze in terror. I had never felt this fear before. Making myself move felt like it was going to be impossible, like something was physically keeping me frozen. It wasn't until I felt the instinct to protect my family that I could explain my reaction. I forced myself to walk out to the living room to get a rifle. As I calmly walked past the girls, I would rather not freak them out. They asked me what was wrong. You look white as a ghost, or you have just come back from the dead. I told them to stay put, grabbed a rifle, and went back into the bedroom and locked the door. It's almost like I was fine at this point with whatever was going to happen to me. It just was not going to happen to my daughter and her mother. Whatever it was had gone, just a fire escape with the lower part that touches the ground still 10 to 15 off the ground. I don't even think the escape works. We live in a small town in Maine. I doubt anyone had serviced the thing in decades, nor would I really want to trust my life with it. So it was this event that had me looking back into this topic. I was fascinated years ago, and I am fascinated again. I still can't say for certain what I saw that night. All I know is that it was not my imagination or pareidolia. I had viewed whatever it was from multiple angles. It moved as I was stationary. It was not one of the other tenants. I had a good enough look at it to tell it was not well human. What did I meet? I had an encounter with a person/angel/demon/parallel universe person/alien a few years ago in New Orleans. It's a moment that I simply can't get out of my head, but I haven't been ready to talk about it because the entirety of the experience sounds crazy, and I'm generally a rational human being. This is a throwaway account for obvious reasons. No one in my circle of family or friends knows what I went through in the first 4 years of my relationship, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. I'm hoping someone can identify what exactly happened and perhaps talk me out of believing that this was a supernatural experience. A few years ago, my husband and I were on our honeymoon. While things are fantastic now, they haven't always been. My husband had a lot of emotional baggage from his youth, as did I. While I tend to internalize things, my husband is the opposite and was often taking his anger out on me. He was an alcoholic, cheated on me, did more than a few things to break my trust, was emotionally exhausting, and was part of the reason I spiraled into a deep depression. While I probably should have left him instead of marrying him at the time, I'm glad I didn't. He's worked on himself significantly, and although he does lose his temper every now and then, it's no longer directed at me. He's not a villain. The backstory is to allow you to understand why I still question to this day what happened. It was our second or third day in the city. We were starting our day, walking from the Marigny to the French Quarter. I decided to go into a few stores while my husband smoked a cigarette and waited for me. As I came out to meet him, he was talking to a very tall man with long straw blonde hair in his mid-40s or so with a dog on the edge of the sidewalk while he leaned against the storefront. I love talking to people, so as I joined him, I invited him to come on into my bubble, because I say weird things like that. This was my first inkling that something was off. He looked at me intensely and said to me, "Don't ever say that. You never know what you're inviting over." And came closer all the same. The rest of the conversation was weird to say the least. It was not quite esoteric in nature, but it felt like the things he was saying could be brushed off as a crazy man in need of medication or a soldier who had lived a rough life. I don't particularly remember what he said other than it was off. At some point he asked me if I knew what I was wearing around my neck. I said, "Yes, of course, it's the tree of life. I made it." I can't remember the details along with exactly what he said, but after this he looked at me and then looked at my husband and said to me, "Why are you here?" I replied that it was our honeymoon and that we were married. I remember feeling the weight of those words on my chest at that moment. I remembered the heartbreak and everything that had transpired in our relationship, and we shared a moment where it was as if he read my mind and knew. He gave me a look of what I can only describe as empathy or sympathy. He looked at me and said, You're full of light. Your heart is full of light." He turned to my husband. "But your heart is darkness." He turned back to me at that point and said, so only I could hear, "Do you want me to swap some of that out so things are more balanced?" He looked at me intensely. Like this was a heavily weighted question with consequences. I'm not sure what compelled me to do so, but I nodded yes. At that point, he touched both of us in the spot of our third eye and told me it was done. I looked him directly in the eyes, face to face for the first time since we started to talk. He was at least 6 feet 5 inches, so I had to crane my neck up to look at him. It was then that I realized how strange they were. His pupils were red. Red. They were not black, did not reflect light, and did not have any other colors. They were bright red. The color of the iris was like mine, blue with spots of brown, which is not very common. I said to him, "Hey, your eye color is the same as mine." I wasn't brave enough to ask about the pupils. He looked genuinely surprised that I was able to notice his eyes. It was like he pondered this for a moment and then shrugged as he said to me the weirdest thing. "Maybe you're a descendant." As he walked away with his dog, he yelled, "By the way, I never wash my hands." As he laughed. Here's the thing, for the rest of the day and well into the evening, we both felt a tingling sensation all over our bodies. It felt like a sensation that wasn't quite an itch, rather, it started from the spot he touched and spread down our bodies until it reached our feet and then disappeared. I assure you, approximately a week later, our relationship began to gradually improve. While I believe it's mostly because of my husband's effort for change, part of me wonders if the catalyst was that moment in New Orleans. Funny thing is, my husband doesn't remember any of the weird stuff. He remembers the homeless guy and acknowledges that he was strange, but he doesn't recall any of the spiritual things he said to me, the color of his eyes, or any other details. He doesn't even remember how tall and imposing the homeless guy was. I mean, dude looked like a Viking. Who exactly did I meet? Seeing figures pretending to be my brother. So this event happened as 2 instances, one on February 5th at 6:30 a.m. and today at 6:16 a.m. So I'll start. The first time it happened, I went to the laundry room to put my clothes to wash, and the only lights were on in the laundry room and the light in my room, which illuminated a bit of the hallway, so when I was finished with my laundry, I heard footsteps and saw a dark figure running at me with heavy footsteps, so I automatically assumed it was my brother, so I yelled his name, and then the figure took a sudden right turn into the living room. I was a bit confused because he would usually answer, so I turned on the light to the living room, and to my shock, there was no one there. I went to my brother's room and asked him if he left his room, and he replied, "No, I haven't," so that sent a shiver down my spine. So today around 6:15, still in my bed, I opened my eyes and saw my younger brother standing next to my closet holding his tablet, not facing towards me, his whole body was pointing at my closet. I thought it was a bit weird because my door was closed, so I closed my eyes to try to fall back asleep. Then I decided to open my eyes again, and I saw him much closer, standing on the side of my bed, still in the same position but significantly nearer. I tried to say something but felt like I couldn't speak. I fought, then I said talk multiple times, and then it vanished. I got up and went to my younger brother's room, and there he was, fast asleep. It sent shivers down my spine. I've thought about it, and maybe it was sleep paralysis? I'm not sure because I was still able to move, and I know what sleep paralysis feels like, and it didn't feel anything like sleep paralysis. I don't know what he is, but he definitely wasn't human. I work in retail. Seen a lot of shit. There was this man that walked in, and I got a chill and my chest tightened. I experienced frequent panic attacks, but this one felt different. He was bad news. Of course, he approached me instead of anyone else. The convo went like this, me trying not to throw up. "Hi, how can I help you?" Him staring at me with a terrifyingly huge smile. "I need help with my phone." Me, "Actually all I can do is make you an appointment." So he says okay, and I make him an appointment. I hate working with him and want to run to the back. He is with his wife, who seemed normal and gave me good vibes. Lady. Run. She could become a skeleton in his closet. He was evil. Still makes me nervous and feel like I'm being watched. I just freaked myself the duck out. I told him to have a nice day, and he said, "Thanks, you too." So I laughed and said I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic. He looked me in the eyes. Eyes are literally the windows to the soul for me. I look in someone's eyes and see their darkest secrets, any emotions they felt in the past, their thought process, and a sense of past trauma. I know it sounds ducking insane. Also, intentions. I thought it was normal, but when I found out it wasn't and my grandma said I had the gift, I was like, no, I don't, that's not possible. I figured I was just really observant or something. But no. I say, shit, I had no way of knowing. About strangers. I feel like they're lying, even though I genuinely feel shock from them. I don't guess numbers and shit. But I know what people have been through. Strangers, once I look in their eyes. I got tested for schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. At least 5 times. They call it an active imagination, but it's accurate. Anyways, more on that later if you've got questions. Behind those eyes was evil and hate. Nauseated me. Gave me goosebumps and a shiver on a hot day. His smile got bigger, and he said, "You know when you ask someone if they are being sarcastic? Nice men like me get angry." I don't know how I appeared calm on the outside. That felt somehow like a threat. I said goodbye and walked calmly to the back of the store and then had a full-blown panic attack. They aren't uncommon, but I never hear about customers because, to be blunt, I have only genuinely given a duck about 2 of them in my entire time in retail. So this was a big deal. He scared the shit out of me. My manager sent me home because I kept throwing up, not that that was uncommon, as I was bulimic, but I never have at work or in public bathrooms, as I am a huge germaphobe. But before they had said it, a man asked for me. I refused to help him. Normally I'm trying to get a raise, and unless they make me feel unsafe, I will help a customer. They sent my friend, who is 6 feet 3 inches, ripped, and protective as duck of me. He said he got really bad vibes too. So did the guy that gave him the tech help, but not on the same level. My friend who had just gotten off work saw me, and he walked me to my car because I was not laughing or cracking jokes, but I was completely serious for once, and it scared him. I am like the equivalent of the class clown in the store and am normally the comedic relief in tight situations, as the I thing tells me how to make people feel certain emotions. Like happiness and make them laugh. Bad ones as well, but I have rarely tapped into them. I feel depressed, so I want to prevent others from experiencing the same feelings. At the same time, I have a general disdain for other people. I know, a weird combo. I care about others, yet there are times when I prefer not to be in their presence or engage with them. Being around them is exhausting because whenever I look into someone's eyes, it's like an insight check in D&D. I have no control over when to do it. It makes people think I'm not paying attention, but I can't pay attention and look someone in the eyes. But I could not look away. I was stuck looking into those evil eyes. This was not just the average dislike I have of people, this man was bad ducking news. His smile seemed too big to me and was more menacing, like a dog baring its teeth. Is that how it's spelled? I'm dyslexic, Lamau, it bares its teeth at you. He didn't feel human. His wife was lovely and a sweetheart. She was normal and had a beautiful genuine smile. She was oblivious to him. I can't explain it. Other people saw a normal smile in human eyes. I know what I saw. His eyes looked normal but were not human. His smile was too big. I haven't told anyone because it would freak the people that believe in this stuff out, or they wouldn't believe me. I figure people on this community would understand. I don't know what he is, but he definitely isn't human. I hope his wife is okay. She was so sweet. Saw a double of myself today. This past Wednesday, while I was driving home, I encountered an individual who bore an identical resemblance to me. A little backstory, I live in a very rural area, mostly 2-lane roads and single-lane roads. I was driving my wife's car, going toward my home. As I topped a small hill, I could see someone in the oncoming lane. No big deal, but as it was in a curvy section of road, I slowed down. I noticed the car looked like hers, and then I noticed that it looked exactly like hers. As we passed, I looked and saw that the man driving was me. Same clothes, same car, and had the window down just as I did. I stopped at the next place I was able to get off the road and just thought about it for a bit before driving on home. Kinda forgot about it, but it's beginning to bug me. What could this be? I had an experience some time ago that I've never been able to shake off. So this happened in Charleston, South Carolina, around Christmas of 2017. I used to work at a popular coffee shop that was inside of a popular big box retail store. One day around Christmas time, I had 2 guests that struck me as odd immediately. They were pale Caucasian women probably in their mid-20s that both looked nearly identical, but one was about a head taller. They had the exact same haircut, a very straight platinum blonde bowl-like cut. Their faces were quite round, and their eyes were a noticeably bright hazel color that appeared large, but not in a disproportionate, gray alien-like way. They both also had a fairly odd stiff gait, as though they had a board strapped to their back. They sort of shuffled their feet around when they walked. They both also had on oversized sweaters, and I noticed later the shorter one had theirs on backwards. The weird part was their behavior. When they first walked in, the shorter one looked around the store as if they'd never been in one. Her overall demeanor was childlike. Like a good customer service rep, I welcomed them in and told them to ask if they had any questions. The short girl looked to the taller one as if for approval. She then slowly nodded her head towards me, mouth slightly agape, and then attempted a hand wave. Instead of waving at the wrist like most people, she waves with her forearm, palm flat and straight, in a sort of robotic windshield wiper-like motion. She then turns to the taller one who gives her an encouraging nod. They then proceeded to walk around the cafe, looking at the cups and merchandise. The short girl would often point all around the store and seemed to be asking the taller one questions. It felt almost like a guided tour of sorts. Now obviously I'm no linguist, but my city is a fairly popular tourist destination, and I've met foreigners from all over the globe. Even if I don't recognize a specific language, I can usually estimate approximately where it may originate from, whether it is of Germanic, Slavic, Asiatic, Middle Eastern, or other origins. But the language they spoke to each other was very strange and not like one I've ever heard. Imagine if you mixed Simlish with baby babble and sped it up. Lots of ga, blue, and oo sounds. They continued on, checking out the merchandise and going on what seemed to be a Q&A session. They would often open up cups and look inside. Grab bags of beans and squeeze and shake them. At one point the shorter one took apart a French press, and the taller one seemed to try to explain what it was for. This went on for about another 10 minutes or so when the short one picked out a studded cup to purchase. She shuffles her way to the POS and puts the cup on the counter, frequently looking towards her friend as if looking for reassurance, who again does a simple nod and encouragement. She then looks towards me and attempts to smile, which was just baring her perfectly straight white top teeth as though she were biting her bottom lip, and slowly nods, not saying a word. It was here I noticed her sweater was on backwards, the tag sticking out in front of her neck. Now that I had a good look, I will say she was quite oddly attractive, but there was something about her appearance that gave me uncanny valley vibes, but I couldn't tell you what exactly was off. I will say I don't recall them ever blinking. I scanned the cup and went on the typical checkout spiel, to which there was no reply. When it was time to pay, she pulled out a silver credit card that had no markings whatsoever. No logos, no numbers, no name. Just blank plastic with a chip. She then looks back over to the taller one and says something, who then comes over and finishes the transaction for her, showing her as though it were a teaching moment. I hand her the cup, and she once again slowly nods her head, mouth agape, and does her windshield wiper wave. They then shuffle their way out of the cafe into the rest of the store, and I never saw them again. I've told this story to people before, and they usually handwave it and say they were probably just tourists from Europe, or maybe they had a condition of sorts. But like I've said, I've encountered many foreigners, and none of them acted this much like a fish out of water, nor was their overall demeanor and behavior this uncanny. I won't rule it out as a possibility, of course, but it just doesn't quite sit satisfactorily with me. It was just too weird. I don't know. What do you guys think? Have any of you experienced anything similar? When I was in middle school, there was an inclusion teacher who was decently liked throughout the school, but I had only seen him once or twice from a distance. Teachers always talked about how nice he was. One day, I had said I needed to go to the bathroom and was just wandering the halls because I was bored, and I turned a corner to see him walking the other direction. He looked like his bones were too long for his skin, and he had this uncomfortable, disjointed gait. I stopped and just watched him, trying to figure out why he looked so weird, and randomly he froze in the middle of the hallway and turned around slowly with this huge smile on his face. Think Tom Cruise with his big grin that doesn't reach his eyes. He made direct eye contact with me and straightened up, and I swear I saw his bones click back into place and shorten, and he turned and started walking towards me, and I just booked it into the closest classroom to get another teacher. I said I was scared of him and that he made me think of a monster, which led to an investigation into the teacher. Young child making monster claims about an adult was taken pretty seriously. Turns out he was preying on the kids that he was helping and actually ended up being arrested a few days later at the school for being a predator. To this day, I still have no idea if he was actually a supernatural monster or just a human being. I used to have a very active imagination, so I don't know if I just saw something and made a story in my head or if he was actually a terrifying creature, but he for sure ended up being a bad person. My experiences with aliens/non-humans. Basically, long story short, I keep on meeting non-humans/aliens that show me that life isn't real on a monthly to weekly basis wherever I go around the earth, even if I travel abroad. In 2020, I encountered two individuals who claimed to be nameless. They offered me weed and requested that I take 2 puffs, which left me feeling like a statue for an extended period. After that experience, I started receiving numerous messages indicating that I was going to die. I was on my way to a party when my mom asked me, "Are you finally going to die?" While smiling and at the party, everything and everyone around me began to freeze. Then 5 people wearing party masks surrounded me, told me to sleep, and started holding my ears, eyes, and head, starting to twist it like a radio. I saw a message very vividly in my eyes that had a countdown like 3, 2, 1. Congratulations, you are dead now. Thank you for playing the game, and then it asked me, would you like to play again? And I instantly clicked yes. Then I saw a message that said, low battery, danger, etc., and everyone at the party yelled at me, saying that it's full, and some people were touching me as if I were a computer and kept calling me a machine. I asked someone, what am I meant to do now? He ended up saying, go left or right, and you'll find whatever you want. 2 years later, I inquired with several individuals about how to activate the glasses I had received at the party. I told them it was low battery. They said, it's not low battery, you're just acting. Then they asked me to stand in the middle of the drive-through road, close my eyes, relax, and look towards the light. I did because I felt like I had nothing left to lose, and I ended up getting held by officers that felt like they were going to give me trouble, lol. Then they made me sit and instantly pushed me back on the ground, and they put headphones on my ears. They were playing the song I'm a Mess by BB. They turned up the volume to the part of the song that said, it's going to be a good life. Then I felt as if my body had become an empty sky, and when I looked up, I saw numerous smile emoticons and winks formed by clouds, making me feel like I was wearing sunglasses. I ended up yelling out loud, what the F was that? Towards the people who told me to do this, they said, I don't know, told me to enjoy it, and then left. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting on a different spot from where I was. I also ended up meeting a guy, and he came up to me when I kept saying, nothing here is real, over and over in my head and was feeling distressed. Then a guy came up and ended up saying, this is all fake, right? Nothing here is real. He said that he's a guide and doesn't want to come again. Said that he came up to me twice and didn't listen, and asked me to yell out I can control everything in a crowd full of people, which I did lol. I also end up seeing some people that end up treating me like royalty and sometimes come up with a different name and slightly altered appearance. He ended up asking me once when all these humans will begin loving you. I ended up saying, when I give them permission. He says, I approve it, and always treats me as if I'm a computer that says that he studies computer science. They consistently seem to read my mind, responding to questions I have in my head without me saying anything. They always refer to me as a character, and when I ask them what my real name is, they refuse to answer, avoid calling me by my name, and tell me to fly high like a butterfly. Sometimes, they encourage me by saying that I'm going to succeed, and they often joke about how easy life is. They always show up when I have a significant dream or end up figuring something significant out or when I'm super distressed lol. Fast forward a year later, I meet a couple of weird guys. I think they're normal. I keep on talking to them on a daily basis for a year. They always ask me, what's in your head? I hope you tell us, how can we be like you? I ended up seeing the guy accidentally at the airport, and he was working there. I traveled back, and after a long while, I felt like they're not really normal people, and as soon as I had that realization, they instantly showed up and started cracking really dark jokes and kept on saying my name really loudly. The guy has a burnt face and body, since I knew him. I said that there's nothing funny, and then the guy gave me a really deep stare and said, is there such a thing as anything? I asked him if he went to work. He said, what work? They continued to make dark jokes accompanied by fake laughter, and I began to laugh. Then a bug instantly showed up on my neck. My friend looked at me and asked, are you able to create stuff here? He then picked up the bug and started laughing. A guy began scratching my head as if I were a child and said, there's so much stuff in your head, while a woman present remarked, doesn't he look like Super Mario? Referencing the posts I make online. Someone also said, yeah, he looks like something out of anime, and then they told me that life is a video game, to which I responded by asking how to get out. They sat in front of me and asked me to take 2 puffs of CBD, then one guy said, look, guys, he can see things that aren't there, and I ended up seeing tons of smile emoticons. Then one guy asked me how many eyes he had. I ended up saying, 7, 1 million, 6, and then he stated that he got only 2 eyes, super seriously, and I ended up holding the trees that were behind me. One guy imitated me and asked me to give a middle finger to the world. I responded by saying, save me, and then the guy present kept repeating, save me, in a high-pitched voice as if everything were just a 2D game, and they also told me there's no such thing as time, and there are no rules or laws for anything here. After returning home, I spent some time on my computer and noticed peculiar comments on my posts, repeatedly asking, how are you enjoying the hack? Along with devil smile emojis and hee, my 7-year-old nephew started crossing his arms, remaining silent while observing the content I watch online and the anime songs I listen to, frequently referencing those songs. I ended up having an intense dream once, and then I woke up from it, and I found a letter in my drawer titled 1/6. I opened it, and I found a keychain and a letter that asked me to go to the London Eye in the UK, to be brave, and to follow the instructions on where to find the second letter. I ended up telling a person everything that happened to me, and then the one guy that I opened up to ended up saying, you're not player 1, you're player 2, and kept on saying, you're not real, and you're not real over and over to me, and then walked away. I encountered that same person again. He approached me and said, "It's all part of God's plan," claimed that I am not human but an AI, and stated that he knows the full story, eventually declaring that he is God and that he created me. Then I met a guy who I thought was normal again and ended up befriending him for years. He was a cool guy who liked music and was acting pretty normal when we first met. I ended up overthinking a lot one time, and then he tapped my shoulder and said, "What are you thinking about?" I said nothing. Then he said, "Can I be part of your defenses?" I said, "Of course." I ended up putting sunglasses on my eyes and asked him how it looks. He ended up saying, "Can you put it on your head?" Then said, "Nah, it looks better on your eyes," and I realized what he meant, lol. He ended up showing me a game of basketball, and I started laughing because it looked computer generated. I kept on befriending a guy who I thought was normal. He had no tattoos, and he used to play chess with me. I always ended up winning, but he finally beat me in the last match. Fast forward several months, he revealed that he wasn't normal by showing me his knee, which had the all-seeing eye, Illuminati pyramid, tattoo. I experienced a very intense déjà vu when I looked at the tattoo, and it seemed to keep expanding on his knee. The more I looked, the more lines appeared on his knee and leg. I asked him if it could blink, and he ended up stretching his leg. He ended up saying that he's a wrestler and asked me to do John Cena's move, lol. And I ended up getting blacklisted from the place due to something that I've done, and I tried on getting back there while crouching as if it were a video game, and no one was able to see me, and some people were trying to ask me to leave, and he asked me to do John Cena's move, and the people that were trying to kick me out because I'm blacklisted ended up leaving me alone, lol. Fast forwarding a couple of weeks later, I ended up feeling my body melting and started sweating a lot. My really normal friend, who is a cashier at the cafe I go to, ended up saying, "Open your eyes." We reached it, and then the two guys came up to me, said, "Hello, AI," their eyes started glowing, and there was a circle on them, and they ended up giving me 3 puffs of CBD, saying, "We are giving you this so you can feel it," and I ended up glitching a ton. My body was moving on its own, and I started pissing and vomiting on myself, and I saw tons of lights and saw 5 beings that ended up surrounding me and felt like everything was over/melted, and I felt intense heat in my body. And started on getting inside the window glass. The people who were making comments about me there stopped and went silent, and I felt like a computer, started on touching the ground as if it were a computer, and saw tons of lights that never stopped. I ended up seeing lots of shit and that there was nothing above or below me, and after everything was done, I opened my eyes and saw myself sitting on a chair in a different place from where I was, and my longtime friend's hair turned green. He started laughing and said, "All these levels you are trying to reach, I've reached them way long before you," and told me to relax. Apart from the really old alien friend that I keep on calling, who talks to me in a cryptic manner and ends up foretelling my future here, I met him at the mental hospital and took his contact. I have no one else to talk to. That's not even all. That's like the tip of the iceberg, and all of it happened. This shit isn't easy, and I'm tired a bit. I used to be a smoker and would buy my cigs almost every day at the same convenience store a block from my apartment. One day I go in there, and there's a line, which wasn't common but did happen sometimes. So I'm waiting in line, and I notice this old man I've never seen before standing at the front of the line next to the counter, but as each person gets helped, he just stays there. I was curious why he was just standing there and not buying anything but didn't think too much of it. Then it was my turn in line. I bought my cigs, and as I was leaving, the old man followed me out. He said, "You're a mighty young man to be smoking cigarettes." And I said, "Yeah, it's a bad habit." And I kept walking, but I noticed he was following me, and I felt bad running away from this old man, so I turned to talk to him. He said, "Do you believe in God?" Which was weird because I'm not religious, but that had been on my mind lately. I said, "Yeah, I guess I do." He said, "God is going to help you quit cigarettes, and it's going to be the easiest thing you've ever done." I smiled and said, "All right, sounds good to me, man." He shook my hand, and then we went separate ways. Fast forward to 2 months later, I randomly wake up one day and don't feel like having a cig, which was uncommon since I always started the day with one. This kept happening, and after 2 weeks I had enough momentum where even though I was tempted, I just kept it up. The really crazy part was about a month into it, I was talking to my mom on the phone, and she was so excited I was not smoking cigarettes anymore. I remembered this old man, and I told her the story. Afterwards she asks, "Was there anything different about his eyes?" Which was insane because a detail I hadn't mentioned was how this old man's eyes were unlike any I've ever seen. He was African American, and his eye color was almost white. It was incredibly striking. I asked her why she would ask that, and she said she heard that sometimes when angels visit, they have eyes like that, and she was curious. I still haven't smoked in the 8 years since that happened. I'm still not religious, but boy do I believe there's some higher power. My wife saw a faceless figure going down the stairs. I want to preface that I did not see any of this, mostly due to my vantage point, but I was in the room with her. Roughly an hour ago my wife and I were talking on our couch. Her seat allows for a peripheral view of one of our sets of half stairs, tri-story house. As I was saying something, she immediately jumps up and, within a few seconds, says she saw a kid, not one of our two, walking down the stairs, and that is what spurred her sudden movement. Where I was sitting is essentially back to the stairs, but I lined up the shot. Even if I had been facing that way, the wall would have blocked it. According to her, she attempted to recall specific details of something she saw for about 2 seconds. At the moment of realization of the figure, she felt a blanket was placed on her, attempting to tell her, "No, this is just your son, don't worry." But her internal instinct piped up and told her to not let this thing get behind her. Ironically, if that were its goal, I would have certainly seen it if I were in fact capable of such things. It was lanky, possibly 2D but almost spindly, like a spider, with knee joints resembling those of a spider. It had clothing on, unsure of exactly what, but it was wearing something. She saw it move, hand on the banister. The leg movement was similar to how our youngest kiddo comes down the stairs, just a bit more overreaching, like it had to force itself to do so. Its face was almost purely white and had absolutely no facial features. She tried to rationalize it immediately and failed to do so. Since I did not see it, I am forced to look at the conditions and do my best to reconcile it in my head, mostly so I can get some sleep tonight. The lighting wasn't terrible on the stairs. There are 8 stairs, and at the top we have a nightlight wall outlet. She said it was on the 3rd from the top, stepping down to the 4th from the top. The downstairs light illuminates it fairly well. I cannot chalk this up to the dark corridors hallucinations that I have experienced in the past. Does anyone have any experience with such things? I am at a total loss. It should be noted. My wife appears to be very prone to paranormal encounters/experiences. I have not experienced one thing that I could not at the very least chalk up to weird timing or my brain playing a small trick on me. I certainly believe my wife, but I do not share the experiences she has had.